All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Carried. Roll call, Mr. DeAndrea.
Mr. Bauka.
Yes. Here.
Mrs. Backer.
Here.
I'll get this right, yes.
Mrs. Bloom.
Here.
Mr. Brzezinski.
Here.
Mrs. DePinto.
Yeah.
Mr. McEnroe.
Yes.
Mrs. Stratton.
Here.
Mr. Walsh.
Here.
And Mr. Sykes.
Here. We opened actually our meeting right at the beginning. There was no action taken other than going into executive, so public notice was given at that time. We will, out of deference to our country, recite the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand.
Excellent. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you just remain standing for 1 minute. We had a longtime employee who has since retired pass away, and I got the notice, and it read obituary Anne Marie Smith, and I actually looked initially and I said, who? Because I didn't recognize the name. But then when I opened up the email, it read Anne Marie Granny Smith, and I realized it was one of our cafeteria workers who worked here, and everyone knew her as Granny. I never knew her name was even Anne Marie. But she was a wonderful lady, served our kids every day. The kids called her Granny. The principal called her Granny. The board president called her Granny. And she was a wonderful example of how one of our support staff members could make a significant contribution to education through making our children feel loved and appreciated. So I'd just like to have a moment of silence in remembrance of Granny. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, I guess I'm up. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to start tonight with a presentation of Vision 2030. We're going to talk about the process that we're going to undergo in the district to operationalize this. I'm going to be up first talking about the overall vision and the board goal that we're going to adopt, or hopefully going to adopt. And then Dr. Labby will follow me after that to talk about more of the specifics of some of the stuff we're going to be tackling in the upcoming school year. So, Dr. Labby and I met last week, and we started talking about how can we operationalize Vision 2030? Because Vision 2030, as I mentioned back in January, is basically the concept that our kindergartners that we had January, who now in September are beginning first grade with us, are the college graduating class of 2030. And the world that we're preparing them for is not the same world that we live in right now, and we need to basically make sure that they are ready to enter the workforce in 2030 and look at the jobs that are going to be there, the skills that they're going to need, and what they're going to need to be successful. Now, one of the important things I want to key on, because I know I've heard some feedback from staff members in the district, when you talk about Vision 2030, this is not an elementary school initiative. This is a district-wide initiative. And whether you're the teacher of that first grade class, which will enter the workforce in 2030, or you're the teacher of the high school freshmen, which will enter the workforce in 2022, you're basically still under the same challenges. We can't prepare our kids for the world that we know. We can't prepare our kids for the world of 2014 or 2015. We need to prepare our kids for the workforce and the environment that's going to exist when they graduate college in 2022. So all of this is geared towards starting to build that vision and getting the board involved. So every leader tells a story about what he or she values, and this year the Sayreville Board of Education will begin to tell our story. And it's going to be a very short story. All right, just push the button. Thank you. Purposes and strategies of any vision, not necessarily Vision 2030. It's all about creating shared and meaningful purpose. It inspires passion and interest and guides decision-making and strategy and conveys values. So look, we can come up with any vision we want for the district, but when you look at where you want that vision to go, it should have meaning for the kids and for the people here. We can talk about a vision that is all financially focused or talk about a vision that is all facilities focused, but the bottom line is our teachers in the classroom are really interested in one thing, which is student achievement. How can we do the most for our students, and how can we get them to achieve in 2022 or 2030? So we need to create a vision that has that at the heart of it. We need to know and understand our organization, and we need to communicate it in a way that is compelling to those who we lead, i.e. our teachers and our administrators. It also has to be an integrated systems approach. It can't just be a board vision or something that stands alone. And if you look along the right-hand side of this triangle, you've got the vision, the mission, the values, and the goals. These are all things that the people around this table own. We own that entire side of the triangle. You look on the other side, you've got the methods, the processes, the qualities, tools, the teams, and the continuous improvement. That's all owned by Dr. Labby and his team. But it's got to be an integrated system so that the learners, the teachers, the principals, curriculum supervisors, superintendent, and the Board of Education are all on the same page. And what happens if you don't have that integrated system, if you don't have the vision piece of it, you end up on the right-hand side with confusion. You've got a lot of people all doing a lot of stuff, but nobody really knows where we're going. If you don't have the skills, if you don't have the right people, you have a lot of anxiety, because we all know where we want to go, but we don't have the people we need to get there. If we don't recognize our people, if we don't recognize and reward our employees, then you get gradual change, because people don't know if they're doing the right thing or they're doing the wrong thing, because they're not being recognized, they're not being told they're doing a great job. If you don't have resources, you have frustration. Tell that to any teacher who has entered first period, turned on their computer to do a lesson on the internet, and the internet was down. That teacher is going to feel extremely frustrated at that moment. And finally, if you don't have goals and action plans, which we'll be talking about a little later today, and then again in September and October in more detail, you've got a lot of false starts. We start doing something, and then we say, we're not going to do that anymore. We're going to head in a different direction. Which brings us to the proposed Board of Education goal, which Dr. Labby and I are sharing with the board today and will be asking for approval. By June 30th, 2015, the Sayreville Board of Education will define Sayreville's Vision 2030. By A, describing our current customer, i.e. that first grade student or that freshman. B, defining the expectations of what Sayreville graduates must achieve to successfully enter the workforce in 2030. And C, define a district culture which will enable us to create that environment. So we're going to go through these one by one real quickly. One of the things we talked about is, do we really know our current customer? And I think as board members, we've all seen a student, we've all interacted with students, we're parents, we've got siblings who are in the district, so we know students. The challenge is, we know the students that look like us. We know the students that are read to at night when they go home. We know the students who the school lunch is not the best meal of the day because they've got a warm dinner. We know students who always speak English because that's the students that we know. One or more of us may know a special education student, but not all of us do. And there's an opportunity before we even talk about 2030 for the board to really look at who is our student body. And that can be done through data and gaining an understanding of the demographics that we have here. How many English language learners do we have? How many students on free and reduced lunch? What does that mean? It becomes down to the board talking to teachers, meeting with teachers, asking them, well, what's it like for the students that come to your class? What type of students do you have? What are the challenges that you face so we can gain a better understanding of that? And it may even involve talking to some of those first graders to get to know them and get some input from that perspective. But we need to know our current clientele and our current student body. And these are many of the questions that we can ask and we can seek to gain some knowledge about. Then you look at the other end of the spectrum, was when our students graduate, what are we preparing them for? Do we as a board really have the knowledge to know where they're going and what world awaits them? Do we know in 2030 the top 5 to 7 jobs that are most at risk of not existing? And if so, are we still offering courses that are preparing them for those jobs that don't exist? Have we spoken to industry leaders, business leaders? Let's call the CEO of Raritan Bay Medical Center and get him down here and say, look, what are you looking for in the healthcare profession? We know society's getting older. We know that's going to be a major field. What are you looking for from graduates? College admissions. Let's talk to some admissions counselors. What are they looking for in our graduates? Let's find out how our graduates stack up when they go to college now. Let's get an understanding of that and where the gaps are. But all of these groups play a key part in defining what we want the output. You know, you look at community leaders, members of the community. What values do we want our kids to have? You know, we issue a report card out and you see everything about academics, but when they go into the workforce, they're going to be interested too in what kind of values do they have? Are they the right kind of people? Are they passionate? Are they trustworthy? And we have to look at that piece as well. It's all part of the 2030 piece. Defining a culture. It's been said that culture eats strategy for lunch. We can talk as a board about everything that we want to do. We can talk about the kids we have. We can talk about what we want them to be. But if we don't develop the right culture in this district, it's still not going to happen. You know, the board can't do that piece alone. And it's a lot of what Mr. Walsh talked about. I know when he initially ran for election, he talked about how when he and I were in school, you know, we had that culture here. And I'm not sure if John and I could actually describe it, but we know what it looks like. Well, through this exercise as a board, we need to describe it. We need to put it into words. We need to talk about what does, for lack of a better term, a bomber look like when it comes to a staff member. What, you know, when you look at a staff member, can you say, yes, once a bomber, always a bomber. That individual is part of our DNA in this district, part of our culture. So the culture consists of basically two things. You've got, you know, the structure side of it, which is the superintendent-driven portion, reporting structure, job descriptions, processes. And you've got the board-driven side, heritage and traditions, traits and behaviors, quality standards, and cultural values. What's important to this community? What's important to the fabric of this district? And obviously the two of them, as Mr. McEnone says, shared leadership, shared responsibility. We've got to work together to develop them, even though we have separate ownership of the two. This is a quote from a past president of National School Boards. We spend a lot of time training people, but we don't spend a lot of time defining an organizational culture. Organizational culture, just to talk a little more about it, is the system of values and beliefs an organization holds. The bottom slide is basically from the Disney Institute, the Walt Disney Corporation. I went to their leadership program. A culture is either one that works for you or works against you. It's one that's established by design or one that just happens. I have a feeling, I think when John and I were here, it was one that just happened because there was such a strong cerebral connection in terms of the staff and such a strong history of long-time employees here. It was just, it happened. I think now we probably have to kind of define it more and push for it to be more by design. And finally, it needs to be clear and well-defined. Everyone should be able to describe what that culture is. And again, the board is not going to be able to develop this in isolation. We're going to need to talk to our staff, need to talk to our community, and start defining what that culture looks like. Just an idea of how we can use it. We're all familiar with the Danielson framework and how we evaluate teachers. Well, that's only the one dimension. The other piece of the dimension is on this side, which, as I mentioned, is this person part of the bomber fabric? You know, do we see long-term this person being a part of the DNA of this community, of this school district? And if you've got a teacher that is here on the Danielson criteria, but very, very high on whatever we define this to be, there's a good shot that because they're so high here, we can get them over here and high on the Danielson criteria. We can work with them. We can develop them. Conversely, if they're low here, even if they're high here, this one's probably going to be a lot harder to move. So that's a quick summary of the board goal process. What I'm looking for from feedback and approval from the board is basically approval of this as a board goal. Now, just so everyone understands the impact of that, because it's a board goal, it's something we do. So it's not something we delegate to Dr. Labby. It's not something we delegate to other administrators. It would be us coming in, meeting with teachers, meeting with industry leaders, and defining that culture, defining what we expect our students to learn, and basically coming up with what we expect Vision 2030 to be. And then that would guide Dr. Labby in building the infrastructure and building the support to make it a reality and figure out how. So before I ask for any type of approval, I'm going to ask, does the board have any questions or discussion about this? And I'll sit back down and we can have any discussion. Mrs. Bacco.
I have a question, and I think I asked this when we first developed this Vision 2030. Everything here focused on our current customer who's going to be the 2030 college graduate. My concern has always been the 2029, now to 2029 student. Where does that focus fit into here?
I was going to say 2015.
All right, well, whatever. close enough.
And to a certain extent, I think a rising tide raises all ships. So as you it's not an initiative, and then you'll see it as Dr. Labby goes through his goals. We're not looking only at, well, what do we do for the first grader, and we'll succeed when that first grader gets to 12th grade. That's not the approach. The approach is we need to look at the complete system. And look, when you develop the culture piece of this, whether it's for the first grader that's part of 2030, or it's part of the high school junior that's part of the class of 2016, the culture piece applies. The goal piece applies.
Right, I get that for the culture, but when you see that define expectations for the workforce in 2030, define the current customer who's going to be there in 2030, what about the high school freshman? What are we doing for that student? What are we doing for the middle school student? Our focus seems to be so much on that kindergartner and what they're going to do. How is that going to reflect in the current students that are not in grammar school?
So let me ask you, so I understand your question. Is it more about what are we doing to look at what the high school junior is going to look at in 4 years? Or is it more about what are we doing right now today to help the high school junior? It's not a trick question, because it's not a trick question, because it's two different views. If it's what are we doing right now that we're going to help the high school junior and improve our high school, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Labby, because it's a short term, we're going to do it now, we're going to turn to what his plans are for the upcoming year or two. If it's, well, we've got a high school freshman, and what are we doing so that he can be successful in 2022 when he graduates, I would say to you, when we pull in these industry leaders, and we pull in these other people that we're going to look for input from, we're going to ask them, well, you know what, our vision is 2030, but we recognize we've got graduates everywhere between the class of 2015 and 2030. How is this going to evolve over time? You know, if the accounting profession, let's say, is going to disappear by 2030, well, is it going to disappear in 2030 or is it going to disappear in 2016?
Right, so where's the focus then? What are we doing in this? Like if I read that first page there, I don't see that on there.
You don't, again, the
Yeah,
short
like I
term or is it?
The short, well, I guess when you say it's short term, in your definition, it would be short term. I'm looking at like, say, the students that are not in kindergarten, like, you're right, what are we doing for the high school freshmen? Yeah, the accounting profession disappears. How do we focus on that? I just see so much focus on the kindergartner, and I just feel that the students in this whole presentation in between are getting lost.
So does it help if I just say in A, describe our current customer, i.e. the student?
That would help.
And take out first grade student who will enter workforce at 2030 college.
Yeah, I think all of our students should be our customer, not just the one who's graduating in 2030.
And if that helps provide some clarity to it, I'm okay, because I don't want to be in a position where people think that it's only one cohort, because it's not. But I like the Vision 2030 because it's long-reaching. You know,
But then
it gives
maybe
us.
in B you need to take out in 2030.
Up to, I still like having the, maybe up to 20, or through 2030?
But not
May-
in
may I-
2030 'cause all of
Absolutely.
May I interject?
Absolutely.
You know, for years in education, we've tended to plan from year to year, or in some cases, we develop these 3-year plans or these 5-year plans. And we're learning very quickly that the districts that plan, in a sense, that short term, they get left behind. So if you look at some other examples like the automotive industry, the electronics and technology industry, they're not planning 3 and 5 years in advance. They're planning 10 to 20 years in advance. Because if they don't start planning now for 10 to 20 years, they're not going to be in business very long. And I think that that's the approach we now have to take in education. Think about how much education has changed within the last 10 to 15 years with the advance of technology. It's changing and evolving at an increasingly rapid pace. Paces that school districts cannot keep up with because of the form of strategic planning that they have been accustomed to performing. It's just no longer useful, and it's no longer productive, and that's why we're seeing so many school districts nationwide not meeting expectations that their kids have when they graduate from their school districts. So I hear what everybody's saying, and I agree with you in the sense that we can't take our focus off of our high school seniors this year. And I think that, you know, because we'll have annual goals, we won't. We'll focus on the here and now with our annual goals, but those annual goals will be set up in approximations. Once we develop that vision of how we have to prepare our children that are in first grade now to be successful when they enter the workforce, once we know where we have to get that far in advance, we'll then begin to develop a strategic action plan with approximations based upon the year, 3 years, 5 years, and so forth. And we'll continue to revisit that plan so that annually we are taking the steps that we need to take to ensure that within the next 20 to 30 years, every single child that leaves this school district within that span is equipped with the tools that they're going to need to be highly competitive in college and then obtain those highly competitive jobs in an ever-changing job market. I think that's why we really need to take a new approach to developing a vision, take a new approach to developing a strategic action plan. Looking that far ahead in the future is essential because things are changing at that rapid of a pace.
Mr. McEnroe? And I'll come back to you.
No, go ahead.
Yeah.
Since you want to prod me, first of all, I like this concept. I'm excited. You know, being on the board 9 years, we're finally talking about education. And I remember having longer conversations about this building, about dirt on the softball field, and all these other things. Now we're finally talking about something that matters, is education. Now, the question about what are we doing for those students, you know, that are graduating 5, 6, 7 years, you know, if you recall, we've done a heck of a lot the last, I say, 6 or 7 years with curriculum. What we've done with the number of courses we've done, added AP courses, honors courses, all those things that we did, I think it's reflective in our AP scores and our standardized test scores. So we've been working on doing that. I applaud you for envisioning this vision. I'm certainly in support of it, but everything that you said about, you know, is this job going to be here in 30 years? What Dr. Labby just said, whether you like this word or not, that's what Common Core is about.
Exactly right.
That's Common Core.
Yeah.
It's looking at those things and saying those kids that are graduating from college and going into the
Absolutely.
automotive industry with this latest technology don't have a clue on what to do it. You know, the silicon chip for computers it's reached its max potential. What is the next technology that we're going to have computing power for? That's what Common Core is about. To be talking about this is what we should be doing as a board of education. And I'm excited about it. I don't know. I like to see the budget line with this and those things that we want to do. You know, just the fact that we have Chromebooks and that we've done all these things over the years is to address some of these concerns. It's not like we haven't been doing anything, but now I think what we have is we have an end game, I think now. And I think 2030 was just a matter of the year we were in when you envisioned this. It fit very nicely. So I think conceptually it's what we should be doing here. Speaking about these Chromebooks, who gave them to us, and why can't we log on to them? I guess that's my question.
Well, yeah.
You should be able to.
I tried everything, and it gave
And
me a
you-
crossbone and skull.
Andrew, he'll
And Mr. McEnroe mentioned the Common Core. You know, the other part of this, and I mentioned this to Dr. Labby, you know, if every single board embarked on something like this, we probably wouldn't have the Common Core, because boards and districts would be doing it on their own and driving it at the local level. The other part, too, is I think that this is going to be a kind of a little bit of a stretch for the board in terms of our comfort zone, because as a board, we're very tactical. I mean, and you hit it. You know, when we do high school construction, we're all involved. We're looking at all the details. The bills list comes home. Everybody's going through the bills list. We're a very tactical board. And that's important. I've always told school board members when I train them, you know, look, if you've got pool chlorine on your bill list, you better make sure you have a swimming pool in your district, because otherwise it's a problem. But this is a lot more high level, a lot more visionary. And you're right, Mr. McEnroe, I have no idea what the budget piece is associated with this. And I don't think we're going to know it for a while until we start getting into it and digging into it further. Any other comments on the goal piece? I mean, do we want to edit this, or are we happy with it? Because I think it's important that as a board, we take action to adopt this one way or the other so that we're clear, unless you want to go through your piece first and we adopt it all together.
And I think the purpose of tonight is just to present, get that feedback, give everybody an opportunity to digest this concept and these goals.
And then bring it back.
And then what we'll do is we'll present it to the board for approval on September 2nd.
Okay. Does anyone have, before Dr. Labby goes, does anyone have any additional comments on that? Or, I mean, do you want to make any changes to it? Is it good as it is?
I think
Yeah.
I think it's very good, and I think it's important not to be short-sighted. And just to alleviate some of the concerns about the 2015 graduates that you brought up, I think it only benefits them to bring in information on jobs that are going to be there in 2030. I think we're seeing a lot of people in our community now who are facing problems of jobs they went into, whether it's a manufacturing job, that aren't there anymore. So even though it might be more limited for them than the person graduating in 2030, you don't want to go into a job for 15 years and your pension's gone and everything else is gone. So I think this is going to benefit all of our students, obviously, even if they start getting some information now. So I think it benefits all of our students.
Anyone else? Comments? All right, and Dr. Labby, I'll turn it over to you for the operational part of
Okay,
it as to
great.
how we take it to the next level.
Just to recap a little bit, with regard to my presentation tonight, I will go ahead and talk about our district goals. This is an annual goal. This, in a sense, is going to be the first step that we're going to propose that we take. And once again, just as I said with regard to the Board of Education goal, this is just an opportunity to dialogue, to collect feedback, to digest, and to move forward on September 2nd to ask you for your approval of those district goals. But after that, I'm going to talk about another first step that we're taking. You know, when I came to the district, there was some confusion with regard to the organization of our school district. So with the help of my partners, Mrs. Shediak and Mr. DeAndrea, Dr. Shediak and Mr. DeAndrea, as well as our administrators and so forth, we've been able to put together an organizational chart for you. So I'd like to discuss that with you as well. And then finally, annually, with the anti-bullying statute, we have to conduct what's called a self-assessment. All of our schools conducted that self-assessment. I then have to present it to the board and to the public at a public meeting, go over each one of our schools' self-assessment scores, average it together to get a district self-assessment score, and then submit to the Department of Education those actual scores. I just can't submit those until I've had an opportunity to discuss them in public. So that's how I'll finish up my presentation with you. With regard to our district strategic, or the district goals, the first thing that we want to do is collaboratively develop, by the end of this year, a 3 to 5 year strategic action plan that takes us in that first step direction toward Vision 2030. So again, to address some of the concerns that were already expressed, what are we doing for those kids here and now? That strategic action plan is going to address the here and now for the next 3 to 5 years. And then we'll continue to move in that fashion in approximations to Vision 2030. However, the point that was made so clear by Mr. Sayak is we first have to identify where we want to be in 2030. We have to be able to concretely identify where we want to end up so that we can begin to chart our course in that direction to that ultimate goal. So that being said, the first district goal that I'm proposing is that by the end of this year, we collaboratively, and when I say collaboratively, I mean with the public, I mean with our parents, I mean with our Board of Education members, our administrators, and most importantly, our faculty and staff. We get together and we develop a strategic action plan to focus on where we want to go within these next 3 to 5 years. The next goal that I have is pertaining to student achievement. One of the things that I've had the opportunity to take a look at in my first month and a half here in the district is the proficiency levels of our students. And that's something that I think we need to tackle right away. Again, the question was brought up, what are we doing about that child right now in that 4th grade classroom or in that 10th grade classroom? Well, we definitely have to ensure that as many students in our district as possible become proficient based upon the standards set forth in either the Common Core State Standards or the New Jersey Core Curriculum Content Standards. As measured by the Park assessment that our students will take in grades 3 through 8 in the spring. And everyone should know now that there are two parts to that. There's that performance-based assessment that they'll take in March, and then there's that end-of-the-year assessment that they'll take in May. As well as at the high school level, which is our second goal there within that to promote academic success of all of our students, that our high school students in language arts, in mathematics, will achieve proficiency on that new assessment that our students will be taking in the spring in the 11th grade. Now, I've already received some feedback, and some of that feedback suggests that another measurement that we should potentially look at within the high school are the SATs. And that's certainly an instrument that we can factor into the accomplishment of these goals. So in the end, we could essentially have the Park assessment for language arts and math, a goal set forth there, as well as a goal set forth for the SAT scores that our students demonstrate in both language arts and mathematics. Going on to our next goal, to promote the future academic success of all students is evidenced by the achievement of the following objectives. These are certain steps now. These objectives are steps that we need to take starting now. First and foremost, develop a plan to integrate science, technology, engineering, and mathematics into multiple disciplines of study, including existing curriculum and new courses. Think about the job market now. Think about the job market in 5 years, 10 years, and beyond. Those jobs are going to include STEM components. It is essential that our students have an opportunity to be competitive in colleges and to be competitive in the workforce, and they need science, technology, engineering, and mathematics to do so in this new evolving job market. Implementation of Readers and Writers Workshop. That's an initiative that has already begun. Thanks to the vision of Dr. Shediak, our supervisors, our administrators, and our teachers. But it's just begun. It's a step that we need to continue to make. Think about now, in terms of technology, with the advent of technology, how many of you spend the day emailing? In my position, I get well over 100 emails a day. I have to be able to write. Many of you, in the same way, have to be able to write. Our students, more than ever, when they get into college, when they get into the job market, have to be able to read at a high level of proficiency and a high fluency rate. Because the amount of information that they're going to be exposed to, that they're going to be required to absorb and digest, is incredible. We need to ensure that every student in this district leaves our school system as proficient as possible with regard to their ability to read and write. Development of a math program designed to increase the number of students successfully completing Algebra 1 prior to the 9th grade by the end of the 2016-17 school year. We need to develop a plan to ensure that 80% of our students finishing 8th grade have successfully completed algebra. Again, the requirements of our students, not only in high school, but in college and in the job market, mathematics is going to be at the top of that list. If our students do not complete Algebra 1 by the time they leave 8th grade, the chances of them taking advanced math courses in high school are highly limited, which then translates to the opportunities that they'll have to get jobs in that market where engineering, sciences, those are the jobs that are going to be out there. They will not be able to compete for those jobs.
We need to work on our current math program to ensure that we reverse the current situation. Right now, about 25% of our 8th grade students complete algebra by the end of 8th grade. We need to flip that. We need a plan in place, though, in order to do that. We also need a plan that ensures that 20% of our students finish geometry by the end of 8th grade, because that will go ahead and open up the doors for us to create more AP courses in mathematics, where more and more of our students will be taking those advanced mathematics courses. In order to raise the ceiling, you've got to build capacity down in the elementary school, in the intermediate school, and in the middle school. Inclusion of a response to intervention methodology in our I&RS programs. Back to this goal up here. Far too many of our students are falling through the cracks. It's evidenced by the number of students in grades 3 through 8 that are not proficient in language arts and mathematics. We need to ensure that those children that are struggling are getting the attention that they deserve, that they're getting the services that they need to accelerate their progress. We hold firmly that all of our children will learn and will achieve and will be successful. And because of that, we need to implement something called a response to intervention methodology to help our students that are struggling. If a child is struggling in reading, we need to implement interventions to assist that child in accelerating their reading progress. And then we have to monitor that student very closely to ensure that the interventions that we're implementing are successful in accelerating their progress. That needs to begin now. It not only needs to begin for our general education students, it needs to begin for our students that are classified with a disability as well. Because they too are students that we will ensure are successful. All of our students will be successful. Reorganize the current special education program continuum in order to promote greater opportunities for students with disabilities to be educated in the least restrictive environment. We live in an integrated society. We don't live in a society in which different people are self-contained or different people are put in a different room to work. We need to develop a continuum within our schools that ensures that every child with a disability, to the maximum extent, has the opportunity to learn next to their typically developing peers. Because when they leave the school district, we want to maximize their opportunities to live in an independent, self-sufficient, and integrated environment. We need to begin now with that. And we will start taking a look at our continuum, and we will start moving students toward that least restrictive environment. Financially, the question came about the budget. How are we going to do all this? Very good question. To develop an efficient and fiscally responsible budget as evidenced by the achievement of the following objectives. Increases in new revenue. You know, there was a time in education when our jobs as educators was to educate. But because of the economic crisis that our country is currently in and has been in, and because of the ever-changing job market and the ever-changing requirements that we need to meet in order to fulfill the needs of our students, we need to now begin to work as a business. The days of solely relying on the taxpayers to provide us with our revenue have to end. School districts now have to look to the future, look forward to figuring out and developing ways we too can create revenue. Revenue that we can put into our programs to support the ever-changing needs of our customers. We need to find new sources of revenue outside of the tax levy. Increase in total revenue for facility usage, tuition, and food services for the 14-15 school year. There are many revenue sources that we are currently using or currently have the opportunity to use that we need to begin to maximize. Long-term future, my goal is to potentially try to equal our tax levy in revenue. You probably think I'm crazy. I am actually pretty crazy, by the way. But that is a goal that can be attained. We need to be innovative. We need to be creative. We need to be courageous. But we can generate revenue as a school district. And we will focus on our current revenue sources to try to increase the amount that we earn for our students. Decrease in energy and utility expenditures. The last thing we want to do as a school district is take away from the programs, take away from the resources. Our teachers need tools. Our teachers need training. Our staff members need professional development. In order to better educate our students, we have to provide the people that are charged with the responsibility of doing such with the tools that they will need to be successful. Otherwise, I'm not doing my job. My job as the superintendent of this school district is to support in every and any way our faculty, administration, and staff in doing their jobs. The last thing that we need to do is cut the programs, the resources, and the services that our teachers need to do their jobs. So what do we cut? We look at expenditures, those huge expenditure items that don't directly impact the performance of our teachers. And those are energy and utilities and other forms of major expenditures outside of programs, resources, and services. And finally, the last two focus on climate. Two things have been made pretty clear to me in the month and a half that I've been here, and that school climate, particularly staff morale, and student behavior are areas that we need to focus on. We need to make sure that every single one of our staff members feels safe, feels appreciated, feels like they are a contributing member of a successful school district. They need to feel like they can make a difference and that they are making a difference. And they need to feel challenged. One of the things that we've had an opportunity to do with everyone that's come in the district since July 1 is meet with them. I've met with every single person that's come into this district, just so I can ensure that they know that as a superintendent of this school district, I'm going to go out of my way to make them feel all those things. Staff morale is huge. I've always been a believer in, before we can change practice, we have to change belief. What you believe, you can achieve. We need to start instilling that belief. We need to start making people in this district feel like they can make a difference, and they are making a difference. Climate for students. One of the things that I've looked at is the number of incidents with regard to harassment, intimidation, and bullying. I'll be talking about that later. We need to make sure that there are programs, proactive programs in our schools in which we are ensuring that our kids are not only tolerating the differences that they have from one another, but appreciating them, recognizing that they're in a very, very special community, a community in which there are many differences, differences in race, differences in religion, differences in learning abilities. Our students need to participate in programs that celebrate those differences. That will drastically decrease the number of HIB incidences that we have, as well as the number of incidences that unfortunately lead to major disciplinary action for some of our students. So those are my district goals. Any questions from our Board of Education?
Comments or questions on the district goals?
I have a question.
Sure.
Yes.
It's a financial question.
Yes.
I don't think you're going to get that tax levy to equal the revenue, but.
I thank you for your optimism,
Yes,
Mrs. Bacco.
But I will be the first one to applaud you when you do.
Did everybody hear that? Did everybody hear that?
I
Okay.
will be.
And this is on tape, right?
That's right.
Am I
And
on? Yeah, I'm on.
Dr.
will-
Labby, when you said that, I leaned over and I said, and you thought 2030 was ambitious.
Yeah, that's quite ambitious.
Better to dream big, I've always believed.
But
Thank
it's
you, Mrs.
good to be
Bacco.
realistic, too. Could you just go back to the back one? Where you say increased total revenue, and you see that line where it says increased total revenue, facility usage, tuition, and food services? Okay. I look at that, and that could be very simplistic, and you could easily increase the revenue by increasing prices. So I guess my question is, like, say, for example, in food services, you could just raise the prices and hopefully, the revenue would just go up. How about if you were to increase the bottom line? Would
Okay.
there be a focus on increasing the bottom line as opposed to just raising prices?
Right. Well, let me ask you a question. In job market, okay, if I'm an automobile manufacturer, and I decide I want to increase revenue so I'm going to take this Oldsmobile that's normally priced at $15,000, and I want to increase revenue, so I'm going to sell it now for $20,000. And because I raise my prices, no one buys my Oldsmobile. I'm not going to increase revenue. So I understand what you're saying, but if we go ahead and just try to inflate our rates, that doesn't automatically assure that I'm going to increase revenue. Because what might happen if I increase those rates is I might detract from people utilizing those services.
Right, but so that really is kind of what my question was. So what are you going to do to balance that?
We're going to explore ways that we can get more people to utilize our resources. We're going to market. I'm an educator, not a marketer,
That's the
but
answer
I
was looking
am
for.
willing to try.
Okay, that was the answer I was looking for.
Go ahead.
Mrs. Bacco, some of the things that came up in our committee meeting was to look at other avenues, and one of them is actually to see if there's some type of nutritional consultant that can come in and just look over our menus, our presentation, and things of that nature, and provide some insight as to different ways of doing things. Not saying that what we're currently doing is not the best method, but get insight from someone else to say, have you tried this? Have you looked at that? So we're not just looking strictly at the revenue stream. We're actually looking at other methods of the marketing concept, how we can promote more students to say, yes, we want to take advantage of the meals. The School Bucks program is another avenue. They sent us boxes of material to get out to the parents to encourage them to sign up and be a part of the process and those things. So it's strictly not revenue. There are other things we're looking at in the marketing end also.
Just an example, I mean, and I promise not to do this again. In my previous district, I had 1,000 students, and we doubled the amount of revenue there that Sayreville earned last year. And in fact, that district, we did meet the tax levy and revenue. Smaller district, I understand.
Smaller district.
Smaller district, but smaller resources and smaller market, too. So it can be done. I am dreaming big. I think that the higher you shoot, ultimately the higher you'll go. However, the bottom line is revenue has to be generated in order to accomplish everything that we need to accomplish for our students.
And Mrs. Kilcummins, to save you a trip to the microphone, we know you've been advocating to update our menus and get new products, so we're heading in that direction. So I will acknowledge that right there. You can stay seated.
Is that Mrs. Bacco, any more questions?
No, that was.
Anybody else?
No, I just wanted to mention that at that meeting, we did meet with Shelley, who is the supervisor of our food services, and the public needs to understand that basically her hands are tied. She is regulated by the government as to what she can serve. One of the biggest, she pointed out to us, one of the biggest snacks that the kids bought were Rice Krispie treats. Guess what? they can no longer serve Rice Krispie treats because they're not made with brown rice. Folks, the stuff that they're saying your kids have to eat, your kids don't want to eat. So they're doing their best to make the food appealing. We're just hoping that maybe a consultant can come up with an idea that they didn't think of, but it's almost a shot in the dark. You're really confined, and hopefully it'll work its way out. I don't know how that's going
Yeah,
to
I mean,
fix itself.
we're going to, not to steal from Mr. DeAndrio or even Mr. Syak, I mean, again, part of the process in generating revenue is looking at the efficiency of our operations too. Seeing how efficient we are in a number of different ways, taking a look at the rates, but then looking at the product. You know, and I know Mr. Syak, you know, put this out there just recently to the board. I mean, you know, when you look at children, because their senses are developing, you know, one of the first things that will detract from a child purchasing some type of food item is the smell. If the smell is not appealing to the child will not attempt to purchase the item.
I'm an adult.
Secondly, the appearance of it. The appearance of the food. If the food appears to not look good, they're not going to purchase the item. Now, as adults, we tend to overlook some of those things because we've had some different foods and so forth. So, and our senses are more fully developed. And then finally, taste comes into play. But believe it or not, their taste hasn't fully matured yet. So the two things that our children are relying on most when determining what they're going to purchase are based upon their sense of smell and their sense of sight. So those are things that we need that chef that Mr. DeAndrio spoke about, that we're going to come in and, yeah, we have to meet dietary restrictions as a part of the Healthy Hungry Schools Act. But it doesn't mean that we can't get some recommendations and feedback from professionals on smell, presentation, so that we can enhance the appeal of the foods we serve to our students so that they will consume them.
Anything else on the district goals? Any recommendations for updates or changes, or we think we're good to go so far? Again, we're not going to approve them tonight, but if there's any feedback, I just want to make sure Dr. Labby gets it.
Well, you mentioned the SAT scores. Are you going to incorporate that?
If that's what I've already heard that from one person, if that's something that the board feels strongly about, I'd be more than happy to.
Is anyone opposed to including, it would be an increase in SAT scores, you'll work out the amount
Yes.
as part of the district goals? I wouldn't sense a large opposition to that, but I had to ask.
So what I'll do is I'll compile the total for proficiency math combined with language arts for the Park High School assessment, and then I'll combine the language arts and math for the SATs as a separate goal. Good. Excellent. Okay, moving along to the organization chart. Again, when I entered the district, it was communicated to me that there was some confusion with regard to the organization of the district with personnel-wise. So basically, after speaking to people, and we still have more work to do on individual employees within this, but here is the organization chart that we have developed. You know, if you look at leadership today as compared to leadership 10 to 20 years ago, where it was very top-down, one of the first things that we tried to do was flatten the hierarchy. So the first thing I do make mention of is obviously in a school district, at the top of the organization chart is the Board of Education. The Board of Education works directly with me, and I with the board. As you can see, the board doesn't branch off to anybody else. Ethically speaking, the board's job is to ensure that the district is operated in a thorough and efficient manner. They entrust in the superintendent that the superintendent will do that. So, with regard to the organization chart, I report directly to the board. If the board has a concern, I address the concern from the top down and communicate that back up to our Board of Education members. Beyond that, As you can see, there are, as opposed to the past where the superintendent was here, and then this person here, and then branched off, okay, we flattened that out. So in the past, 3 people reported to the superintendent. Now, our assistant superintendent of curriculum and instruction will report to me. The principals of each school will directly report to me. The assistant superintendent of human resources, operations, and compliance, who was recently appointed and is in the audience today, will also report to me. The director of special projects and technology will report directly to me. Director of special services will report to me. And the business administrator will report to me. So again, there will be now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, as opposed to 3 that will report to me. In a sense, flattening out that hierarchy. As you can see from that point forward, one of the major differences from years past is our assistant principals will report directly to our principals. However, they will now be evaluated by our assistant superintendent of human resources and operations. They're both in the same collective bargaining unit, and we feel that to avoid a conflict of interest, it's best that an outside person evaluate them. But our assistant superintendent of human resources, operations, and compliance will get feedback from our principals when going ahead and developing those evaluations. Reporting directly to our assistant superintendent of curriculum and instruction will be our elementary and content supervisors. Moving over to our director of special projects / technology, our chief technology officer will report directly to that person. Our technicians will report to both our chief technology officer and our director of special projects and technology, as will our network administrator, student information clerk, and our Power School and web assistants. Reporting directly to our director of special services will be our supervisor of special education, and of course then our child study team members and therapists. Business administrator, many people will report to him. First and foremost, our business office, which consists of our bookkeeper and our accounts payable and our accounts receivable people, as well as our payroll people. Also, our director of food services will report directly to our business administrator, as will our supervisor of transportation, or transportation director, as sometimes referred to, and our director of facilities. In essence, this will be our new organization chart. Are there any questions at all
questions from
with
the
regard
board?
to our organization chart?
So you control all that?
Huh?
You control all that?
The power that I have. I don't know how I'm able to walk through these doors.
All right, hearing no questions. HIB.
I have a comment.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
I only
Something
asked for
that
questions.
This has been long overdue.
Oh, you're very welcome. All right, moving along. The anti-bullying self-assessment. As everyone knows, Governor Christie, a couple years ago, signed into law the anti-bullying statute. And with that statute came the requirement for school districts to develop an anti-bullying rating based upon a self-assessment. So at the end of each school year, our health and safety committee members get together and they perform a self-assessment, and I'll go through the different areas that they perform that on, to determine what kind of program in their school they're developing to prevent cases of harassment, intimidation, and bullying. As I said earlier, the presentation of the ratings must be made available to the public and reviewed in public session. Okay? And later on this year, and please, it could happen as late as December, January, or February, the Department of Ed will give us a final report card rating. So they'll take our self-assessment, and what they actually do is what they call reconcile it against another form of reporting that we do twice a year. Twice a year, we're responsible for doing what's called the electronic violence, vandalism, and substance abuse reporting. One for the period of July 1 through December 31st, the next for the period of January 1st through June 30th. Along with that, we're supposed to also report the different activities that we have performed to train our staff and students in the community on HIV procedures, as well as programs that we put in place to prevent HIV. So what they do is they take that data and they compare it with our self-assessment data, and they reconcile it to give us a final report card grade. Usually that comes out sometime in early winter, late fall, okay? We will be posting these self-assessment scores on the websites once they are approved by the Board of Education. And we do have to post the grade that we got back from the Department of Education once it is then approved by the Board of Education and presented to the public. Here are the areas that we rate ourselves on. Number 1, harassment, intimidation programs, approaches, and other initiatives. Number 2, training on the BIO, the Board of Education approved HIV policy. Other staff instruction and training programs is number 3. Gets the incident within a day that it's reported, and that there's a 10-day investigation conducted, and that the principal receives that investigation within those 10 days and makes a determination of whether it is HIV or not. And if it is, are those cases presented to the superintendent with a recommendation for action? And if so, is the superintendent reporting those investigations with recommendations of actions to the Board of Education, and are they approving such? Those go into the procedures. And of course, are we following the state guidelines for reporting twice a year the number of HIV incidents that occur within our schools? As well as, on a monthly basis, are we asking the board to approve the number of incidents investigated and the number of those investigated that are determined to be HIV? We have to do that on a monthly basis, report it to the board, and twice a year we have to report it to the Department of Education. In most categories, our personnel rated us either a 0 through 3. So for each question, some of those domains, there might have been 10 questions. Others, there might have been 2 questions. Either way, they were rated on a scale of 0 to 3. And here are our scores. As you can see, in domain 1, there was a potential for 15 points. We averaged about 12. Here's the district average. Out of 9 potential points, we averaged 7 for domain 2. Domain 3, we averaged 12 out of 15. 4, we averaged 5 out of 6. Domain 5, we averaged 7 out of 9. 6, we averaged 4 out of 6. 7, we averaged 10 out of 12. And for domain number 8, we averaged 4 out of 6. Our final average for a district was 61 out of a potential 78 points. Any questions on the HIV self-assessment?
Any questions, anyone? Comments? And this is relatively consistent with how we performed last year, correct?
Last year encompassed 18 months. The
Okay.
first year encompassed 1.5
The first
years.
6, right.
This year, only the 13-14 year.
But in terms of the overall score, it was relatively consistent? I mean,
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Correspondence, we have the monthly technology work order report and maintenance reports. Approval of minutes. Can I have a motion to approve the regular and executive session of July 15th and 24th? By Mrs. DePinto. Do I have a second?
Second.
By Mrs. Bloom. Are there any comments or corrections on the minutes? Dr. Labby, you did a great job on one set of those, apparently, because there's no corrections. Congratulations.
He was like,
We
"What
won't
is
comment
this?"
on that.
No, we won't.
We figured it out.
Mr. DeAndrea is a magic man.
I had to recite the executive session resolution from memory. He didn't have it with him.
I give you credit for that one, Kevin.
Hearing,
Will that be on my evaluation?
yes. Hearing no comments, roll call, please.
Mr. Balka,
Yes.
Mrs. Baca,
Yes.
Mrs. Bloom,
Yes.
Mr. Brzezinski,
Yes.
Mrs. DePinto,
Yes.
Mr. McEnone,
Yes.
Mrs. Trapp,
Yes.
Mr. Walsh,
Yes.
and Mr. Sines.
Yes. There is no parent involvement representative report. Dr. Labby, your exceptionally brief superintendent's overview.
The standard was just put out there by the way.
Yeah.
In Vision 2030 Finance and Infrastructure, of the major items that are on there are supervisor solicitation contract, our principal solicitation contract, some our 2014-15 facility usage fee schedule, our substitute rates, tuitions for our programs in district. We have lunch prices and food service vendor bidding awards, okay, on there. The 2015 special education extended school year and regular school year tuition contracts, as well as some field trips.
Doc, if you don't use the microphone, the people at home are going to think we hired a mime.
Thank you.
You know, and just for the public's benefit, we will go through, there'll be a committee report in each of these sections, and there'll be board discussion for finance coming up.
With regard to Vision 2030 student achievement, we have marking period, report card, back to school night calendars there for you. Hours of operation, as well as alternate schedules such as delayed opening, early closing, and so forth. Of course, the anti-bullying statute self-assessment scores are on that portion of the agenda. We're also asking the board to approve some marching band advisors, and also asking the board to approve a middle school chorus trip to Philadelphia for the Thanksgiving Day period. Vision 2030 governance, and that basically is policies and regulations via district or state or federal. We're asking for the board to approve the first readings of the following policies: Code of Student Conduct, Management of Life-Threatening Allergies in Schools, photographs of pupils, as well as independent educational evaluations. And finally, for Vision 2030 personnel, we're asking for the board to approve the contract for our new Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources Operations and Compliance. We have some non-certified leaves of absences on there. We're asking the board to approve 7 non-certified personnel members, 2015 non-certified contract renewals and salaries. We have some certified leaves of absences on there. We have some salary adjustments due to degree changes. We have some 2014 advisor and stipend appointments. 22 certified regular or long-term substitute appointments. I will say this to our board members. On item number 26, we are going to ask you to take one name off of that, and that's Nicholas Panos. Item 26, we're going to ask you to take Nicholas Panos off of that.
That's on page 36 for the board members.
There
Mrs.
is a
DeAndrea, you'll note that in the minutes that we're not
Right.
voting on that individual when we vote.
It'll be noted that it was withdrawn.
Thank you.
certified collective bargaining agreement sidebar salary adjustments, our 2014-15 supervisor contract renewals and salaries, our 2014-15 certified contract renewals and salaries, and our 2014-15 certified substitute appointments. That's it.
Okay. Thank you for the overview. We will now go section by section. We'll start with Vision 2030 Finance and Infrastructure. Mr. Balka, you're the chair of that committee. Would you like to give a summary report or any other information regarding the items there?
We just had a little report, a brief meeting. We talked about this cafeteria compared to the budget meeting. It was
3 hours. Jeez, my husband thought I died.
we had a cafeteria.
Mr. Balka, you're correct. It was a brief meeting compared to our budgets.
We went over the cafeteria financial report, cafeteria financial forecast, and cafeteria pricing. We have a slight increase in the pricing this year and reflected in our agenda here. Went over the operating account financial report and his projected budget and fund balance, projected fund balance, and we're We closed out the year pretty good, so we're okay with our fund balance for next year, it looks so. And then, there were slight increases in the fees you see on item 14, just to make the fees uniform between the different schools and different buildings. I'd like to study that some more, look into it, a better way to maximize these revenues. I'd also look at maybe renting, when we rent out the parking lot, either charge for it or at least get some sort of insurance liability, insurance policies, so, in case something happens on our property when people are using our parking lot, that we're covered by their insurance, so. And that's all we discussed at that point for the agenda, so.
Okay, the parking lot change would have to go through the policy committee, but I mean, we do have more organizations using our parking lots. That could be a revenue opportunity for us that we should.
Or at least get some sort of insurance policy like we do for the buses when they use our buses, that they provide us with some insurance so we're covered by any accidents that happen on the grounds.
I wouldn't even be opposed to, putting some revenue behind it as well.
Good.
All right, so that's your report?
You got Rick's attention.
We also talked about.
I know.
We also brought up InfoSnap at the end of the meeting, about the online registration. Are we looking for board approval to look into it, or no?
No,
No, okay.
not yet.
It's just a new online registration where people, once we finally get it implemented, if we go with it, we got to cut out some of these cards the parents fill out every year, so, and
Basically, that InfoSnap system would take the emergency cards and all that information they fill out on paper, and the students, the teacher, try it again, the parents would now go online and fill that information out once, and then just go in every year and verify it. It'll be there for them. There we go. We got some applause. This is good. More applause. All right.
now, on one of these items I have to abstain on. Do I have to pull it out for some
Yeah,
reason
if there's
now, or-
anything that you plan on voting no on or you're going to abstain on, you can note it right now during the discussion item, and Mr. DeAndrea will make a note of it.
Okay, number 6, Emilio.
We got, yeah, I already have that.
Okay.
Okay.
What's that about your
That's the
employment?
treasury report.
Treasurer's report is normal.
Any other questions or?
Any other questions or comments?
Yeah,
Or- yeah. This is a time for board discussion. Anything you want to bring up?
Okay, Ken, Ms. Backo.
Mrs. Becker?
You want to go first?
All right. Did you discuss this Spyglass Group telephone audit? Can you explain it?
We didn't get to that part of the agenda, so,
Mrs. Backo, the board authorized me to go out and solicit the quotations a month and a half ago through resolution. So there was no discussion because the board already authorized it.
Right, but it says amount outlined per contract. What is that? I don't know what that is.
This is one of those where they do a telephone audit and they get a
review it in
percentage
audits
of
and
whatever
they get
savings.
certain fees based on savings or future savings.
All right, well, while you're looking for that, for the long-range facility plan, the updated numbers that we put in for enrollment and building capacities, where do those come from? Do they come from us internally, or is that something outside, generated outside?
Let me just handle one question at a time.
Well, I thought I was asking someone else.
No, you're,
that's gonna go to him, yeah.
Yeah, well, you can answer, go ahead.
Well, I believe there was a demographic study conducted most recently, which demonstrated to us that within the next, I believe it's 10 years, we'll have an increase of about 200 students.
I believe that was the correct.
But yeah, most of that is based on current enrollment and the projections of those particular enrollments per grade level moving up to the next grade level. For instance, what was in first grade last year moving up to second grade. And utilizing the information that we have right now at our fingertips with regard to current kindergarten registration. Keeping that all within context of the demographic report that I referenced earlier.
Okay, so some of the changes came from that demographic report?
Yeah.
Yes. The Spyglass, it's 50% of any cost recovery, 12 times the amount of any service elimination savings, and 12 times any cost reduction. And what I'll do is, I'll just send this to the board tomorrow.
Okay.
I just didn't realize I didn't send it.
Video, number 18, I have to abstain on also for the substitute rates.
Okay, so we have an abstention on number 18 by Mr. Balca. Mrs. Backo, did that conclude your questions, or? No, okay.
Do you want me to keep going? Okay, I have a couple questions on the transfer report. So, page 2, if you look at, let me see, where it says 251, 105, 23, it's overtime for administrators. What is that for? What administrators?
Again, 2251?
It's 251, 105, 23. What is that for? What administrative line is that?
251 would be.
It just says
our-
overtime.
That would be our technology department or mine? I apologize. No, that would be my department.
Oh, his department.
251, 105, 23?
Right.
That would be my office. Individuals in my office.
Okay, and do you know why it was so far off budget?
Basically, I have 4 new staff members learning new positions, and they're training others, because we also have other people training, so there's overtime being used for that. But I can tell you, a majority has been related to having a new payroll person replacing someone who's did the job for 25-plus years.
Okay. All right, and on page 4, there's an other line on the bottom. It says other salaries for instruction. It's 204, 100, 106 PT. Do you know what that's for?
Bottom of page 4. Again, the line item?
204, 100, 106 PT.
That would be a special education program. I believe that may be our LLD program, and indicating PT at the end with reference that it was the part-time paraprofessionals, the time allotted, and some of that may have been done through personnel moving from working one class of classified student to the other.
Okay, and then there's an athletic one on the next page, 632. It says administrative supplies, athletics, and there was just another big
If
increase.
it
in
supplies
that one.
strictly that they needed additional supplies to run our athletic programs.
So what is a supply for an athletic program? 'Cause it like-
Baseballs,
okay, all right,
basketballs,
that's right.
anything of that nature.
Okay, so it's student supplies as opposed to office supplies would be
Mo-
what it would be.
I cannot guarantee that they're all office, there could
Okay.
be office supplies in there.
All right. The contract with Centris Group, what is that for? Is that for technology or?
That's a special education program.
You want to take it? Go ahead.
Mrs. Batko, that's our annual contract fee for IEP Direct, which is our program to have development of our IEPs for our students.
Okay, now this question is a little, number 16, and I know, Dr. Labby, you weren't here, but I just want to clarify this. We had an issue with this in previous years. We're paying $66.50 to Middlesex Regional, and our contracted rate for our teachers is $53. So I assume we're picking up the difference. We're paying that fee. There was some, back to the revenue issue, there was some talk when this issue had come back years ago that maybe we could look into doing this in-house as opposed to paying that fee to Middlesex Regional, because we used to do it in-house. Was there any thought about looking into doing that? I mean, we had talked about it once before, I know, before your time.
I believe that would go into the category of new revenues
Okay.
that we're going to explore. Yes, that's something that we'll definitely be taking a look at. We're very appreciative of the partnership that we have with the Ed Services Commission. However, it is my belief that some of those services we might be able to do at a more fiscally responsible rate ourselves, and I would also argue to say a more successful way.
Okay, because I know we used to do it ourselves, and then we switched over, but we had talked about it a while
And maybe we
back.
could do it for others, too.
And Mrs. Backo, per the new contract, the rate went to 56. It's no longer 53, it's now 56.
Oh, it did go, oh,
Yes.
all right, so,
They charge $10.50
yeah,
above.
I only have the old contract, I don't have the new contract yet. Okay, that's all the questions I have for finance.
Okay, any other questions or discussion for finance? Mr. McEnroe?
How did the cafeteria account do this year?
Lost it.
Quick top, around $16,000 loss.
Okay, how much do we still have in surplus?
$100,000 after that loss.
Okay, so we're okay. This is something that's been of my interest for many years. First of all, I think Ms. Jenkins is doing a fine job. She's a
Nominal.
formally educated nutritionist. I think the cafeteria staff is one of our best organizations. Never hear anything from them. They work hard. They prepare food for 6,000 kids a day. I didn't like doing it for 3, so I applaud them. But, you know, I want to volunteer to be the food advisor, okay? Because I got a question, and this is always amazes me how we practice bleeding. We do this to ourselves, and we sit there and say, oh, look, we have a problem. Now, is there any high school teachers here? Has anybody ever eaten lunch here? The question I have is, can I go in there when school opens up for lunch and get a hot dog and a bag of chips and an iced tea? Could I do
Most
that?
likely not.
You can't
Okay.
get a bag of
Okay.
chips, no.
And the iced
Could I
tea
go in
probably
there
isn't
and
going
get?
to fly either.
Can I
unless
go in
it's
there? Can I go in there and get a double cheeseburger and some French fries?
Double
maybe
cheeseburger.
maybe,
Okay.
maybe a single.
I'm making a point.
You might be able to buy
Can I
2
go in there and
hamburgers.
get
Without
some
the
chicken
bread.
You
nuggets?
can get a
Can I
cheeseburger.
get some chicken nuggets and a couple slices of pepperoni pizza with the extra cheese?
No
Extra
pepperoni,
cheese, no.
chicken nuggets last
And
year.
the
Not
pizza
sure
may
about
be
this
whole
year.
wheat.
Okay, so we're dealing with kids. Now, why do restaurants close? Does anybody know why do restaurants close?
Mr. McEnon, you're being way too
Mike,
logical now.
Mike, this
Okay,
all
because
goes back
food
to the
is
regs. They
because-
have to
right,
serve
so
what they
if I
have
go
to
to a
serve.
restaurant, I order something, and the waiter brings me back some green beans and some carrots and a brown Rice Krispie treat, I'm not going there anymore. And on a serious note, that's the problem. We hold the cafeteria responsible, saying you're losing money, but we don't serve. Everybody talked tonight about customers. Well, who the heck's the customer in the cafeteria? It's the kid that wants to eat lunch. He goes in there and says, I'm not eating this crap. Okay, I'm going to give him green beans, and what do? They throw it in the trash. But give him some hamburgers, give him some, you know, I grew up, I went to school in the 70s, I get hamburgers, French fries. I'm not dead, I'm okay. But we do this to ourselves, so why don't we just buy and serve what sells? What happens? Does somebody come here, the food police, and arrest you? What
We lose
happens?
$1 million.
You lose your subsidies.
You lose your nutritional funding, which is around $1 million, if they do determine that you're not properly serving the right amount of meals and the quantities and all that. I can tell you that Mrs. Jenkins has had nutritional audits done where they have
Is
taken,
this like Michael Bloomberg doing this? I mean, what?
I think someone
Just
with
can't
a
get a
little
big
higher
go.
authority.
Well, see, that's the problem. You know, and other districts have done drastic measures to reduce the cost of the cafeteria, which I am not in favor of doing. But our hands are tied. And like Mrs. Bloom said, we don't sell what the kids want to buy, and then we sit here and we say, well, we lost money again this year. Well, no kidding.
I'm sure the kids would love the crumb cake that we serve.
Well, and here's another suggestion I have about revenue raising. Now, I've been to many, and I know most of you have, to sports banquets here.
We'd
That
love to have more here.
the food services provide food. And not once did I have a bad meal here. Okay, the food is very good, it's restaurant quality, and it competes with anything you can get outside. Okay? And I've said that, and I've sent emails to Shelley, and I've told her that. So why don't we as a district say, if you have a sports team, and I think those sports team, those coaches work for us, if you're going to have a banquet, you're going to use this facility, and you're going to use this versus going out and using some banquet hall you're going to pay for and do that kind of stuff. So why can't we just say, from now on, starting this school year, you have a banquet, you have it here. We built this cafeteria. There's some stuff in there I don't even know what the heck's for. But they produce good food, and we should mandate that if you have a banquet, you have it here. And why can't, so somebody tell me why we can't do that? I'm listening. So we talk about all these things, and when it comes to doing something, we don't do anything.
One of the things I will say about that is most banquets are funded by the booster clubs.
That's
Yep.
fine.
And
the
they're
coaches-
paying that money, and,
Right.
but I hear what you're saying, and I think that rather than demand,
We could
it could be strongly encouraged.
I have a booster club too where I work, and I tell them, this is where we're doing it here. Because I'm the school employee, I'm the one responsible.
And that'll take articulation, by
You
me.
call it articulation, I call it direction.
With, with the
Call it
heads of those booster
dictating.
clubs and the coaches of those sports, I think that's a goal that could be accomplished.
Well, and I can tell you, Mr. McEnon, Mrs. Jenkins has reached out to various PTO organizations and booster clubs to try and promote what we're doing here. And I think last year, based on some of them that she did get some new people that called her. So the word is getting out a little at a time, but I can tell you, she has strongly said to me that she would love to do more, but she just doesn't know the mechanism, as Dr. Labry said, to say, you must do it. That's
And
the
maybe,
tough part.
and maybe
Just
the
to
question
market.
is through JK or through the parent organizations, to those that don't currently avail themselves to it, why? Is it price? Is it food? Is it they just don't want to be in the high school because they're always in high school? I don't know, but let's understand why.
Well,
Yeah,
you
but
talk
I
about-
noticed
you
there
talk
were
about
some
culture,
banquets.
right?
Yeah,
You
but
just
we
talk about
had
culture.
banquets.
Yes, I did.
Then I just listened to culture and culture.
Yes.
How many times
That's
you
what
say
it
that
is.
for the last hour and a half?
Yes.
Okay, so that's part of it. You're supporting each other, it's a team.
Huh?
You
Correct.
come here and you support this service.
I think
And
it's all
just, I don't try to oversimplify things, but I live a long time, and sometimes I just have to shake my head and say, what are we doing? Okay, we're in education, but we don't always do things smartly, and that always frustrates me. We're losing money, we know we're losing money, and we know how to fix it. So sometimes it takes leadership to say, you know what, this is what we're gonna do here in Sayreville. And maybe we start the trend, and maybe other school districts picked it up. But I'm tired of sitting here all the time and just having to say, well, we just can't do it. And that frustrates me. I don't like to have advisors tell me why I can't do things. I want people to tell me how I can do them. And this is what we need to look at. And that's what takes leadership. And that's what we're supposed to be doing here. I didn't join this place to cut ribbons and smile and walk in parades. It's these types of things that we have to fix.
And unfortunately, Mr. McEnroe, when it comes to the nutritional side, those are things that Mrs. Jenkins is always trying to address, because that's the mandates that are coming down as to the percentage of wheat, percentage
Who
of
makes
things.
these mandates? Who does
Federal
it?
government.
And I know it's not our governor.
No, it's federal.
Believe it or not, it
government,
probably
right.
starts with Mrs.
Federal
Obama with her
government.
guidance.
Yes, it does
The
start
Healthy
with
Hungry
Michelle Obama.
School Act,
Bell.
Yeah.
sponsored by Mrs. Obama. Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, they are that stringent. I mean, it's why for a while, we were only serving whole wheat pizza because we couldn't.
Whole wheat pizza.
Yeah.
Who the heck ever orders whole wheat pizza? See, that's the problem. Whole wheat pizza. Kids gonna have whole wheat pizza? And then we wanna know why we're losing money. You know, I'm not trying to make a joke of this, but it's just frustrating to sit here, and
it's a
every
true
year we
statement.
talk about the same thing. We're losing money, losing money, losing money, losing money. And this is one thing I agree with Mrs. Kilcummins on. We serve stuff that kids don't wanna eat.
But we're
But-
required.
And then you know what we do? You know what our answer to that is? Well, let's raise the price on things that kids don't wanna eat.
Well, look,
Is it me?
listen, I appreciate your logic. I
getting all this?
appreciate your outrage. The challenge is, in terms of the food that we serve.
Just do it and see what happens. And then we'll deal with the
listen,
consequences.
as a board, we can certainly make that decision. Just be aware, if the consequences come, you're going to get $1 million hit.
Yeah, it's the same mentality. If this was in 1903 and people had this mentality, we'd still be driving horses and buggies. You know, step out there, step out of your comfort zone, you know, make a leadership. I'll be the chef. This is what we're going to serve.
God
Let's
help
drive
us.
for the school year. And then when our revenue increases tenfold.
It's got to be more than tenfold, though. It's got to be over $1 million.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, it's gotta be
You gotta
$1
bring
know,
$1
it's-
million.
So
You
it's
can't
got to be
cook
more
that
than
fast.
tenfold.
I mean, you better be serving lobster and prime rib here.
All right, so we hire a chef to come in and give us advice. What advice is he going to give us? Put
We're
ketchup
in the
on it?
exploratory phase of actually trying to see if there is someone who understands child nutritional factors.
I had
and
3
things of
kids.
that.
I understand child nutrition.
Oh, I do too, but
Bring them get a Happy Meal.
Mr. McEnroe, my kids don't eat the cafeteria food because they're used to a certain different type.
Who's eating whole wheat pizza? Hey, great whole wheat pizza. What is that? I'm Italian. I've never heard of whole wheat pizza. That's the problem. We do it to ourselves. We practice bleeding. That's what I call it.
Mr. McEnroe, I wish I could tell you that
And then we put
I'm
Jenny,
in full
Miss
agreement,
Shelley
we'll just
Jenkins
go out
on
and
the
make the
spot.
changes, but
No, then we take
unfortunately
one
we
of our
can't.
supervisors and say, well, why aren't you, well, your cafeteria isn't making money.
We're in agreement.
All right, I am assuming that there is no support, that the board wants to just serve whatever we want and lose $1 million, correct? Okay,
Okay.
Listen, I appreciate your leadership. I had to ask the question. Mrs. Bloom?
This seems to be the time, since we're talking about making money and using things to the fullest, for me to bring up the vendors in the parking lot again. It's come to my attention, I'm sure everybody's seen them when you come here for graduations, that there are vendors in the parking lot selling ice cream, selling whatever they're selling. On my own initiative, I asked every administrator if they were supposed to be here. Nobody could answer me. So I approached the truck and said to the gentleman, do you have a permit to be here? And he said, oh, yes. And I asked him from whom, and he said, from the town. I said, no, you don't. This is Board of Ed property. You can't be here. So the problem becomes, number one, they're on our property illegally without a permit, okay? If they could get a permit, that's fine. We would allow them to sell. We have our own concession stand when we have football games, so they don't belong in this parking lot. Now, Mr. DeAndrea tells me that we cannot ask the police to keep them out of the parking lot. Was that what you said? Or we can't ask?
My belief is that it is not within their domain to enforce
our regulations.
our regulations.
So
I
what
could be incorrect.
we have to do then is if we come and we see them and there's a police officer around, we have to ask him to ask them to leave.
I think that's something you can probably address through Mr. Brown, because it's primarily the high school, and it's basically graduation, middle school and high school.
And
Now, are they here when we do
I think that we would
baseball?
need appropriate signage too.
Sure they drive through.
We-
Okay.
In order for the police to go ahead and enforce something like that, we would need to be able to have, we'd have to have signage
Do you need a policy
Yeah,
as well?
no, I would.
indicating
No, I
that,
think you need an ordinance.
Yeah.
You would have to go to the council to get an ordinance for our parking lot, and then the police would probably be able to enforce it. I don't think that should be such a big deal if an
well,
ordinance.
it is in a sense.
Well, let them get a permit,
Yeah,
and
'cause
then
you put up a
we-
sign, it
During
would be
school
per
operations,
an
it is
ordinance.
private property, and during school hours. So we could put signage up there saying that, you know, if you're a, you know, you're a vendor, if you're here not on school business, that you can't come in onto the property.
They're
We'd have to
here-
have signage warning people of that and the consequences.
They're here because you have a long, long line of kids buying ice cream.
So
Sell
can
here.
our cafeteria sell ice cream?
Sell here.
Can we let them sell ice
There
cream?
you go.
Again, new revenue.
So there's a suggestion of how,
Solving
you're
all
right.
kinds of problems.
Okay.
Let our cafeteria staff sell the ice cream.
But then you have to pay the cafeteria staff to be here to sell.
If they sell enough ice cream, they'll make a
Then,
profit.
Yeah, they
There you
should,
go.
they should make, yeah, if it's not profitable, it should be profitable.
All right, Doc, I think you know the concern. We either want to make money off the vendor being here under a permit process, or we want to make money through the cafeteria. If you could just look at that and let us know whatever we need to do, whether it be policy or whatever. Okay? Anything else on finance?
So
All right.
Buildings and grounds next, or how does that work?
That's all
Yes,
together, isn't it?
that's all
Finance and
together.
infrastructure? It's all
Yep.
together.
Is-
Oh,
is
you
this
still have
still-
an additional
I
report?
still buildings and grounds set.
Oh,
That was
okay.
that was
You-
just
Ground
finance,
jet.
yeah.
All right, if you could just give us your additional buildings and grounds report, put all the items
Where's
that you
buildings
covered.
and
We're working hard.
Yeah, we quickly discussed some projects that we finished, some projects that were going on, some projects were in the process of starting. The only major items we really discussed were the high school sign. They were looking at a
where is it?
Got you covered.
$14,000 estimate to retrofit it with a new sign, so. High school gym flooring, because there's some water damage and some of the floor buckled, and now there's concerns that the paint color might not match, but we said we could live with it for a while with the paint not matching. Slover
while.
School assessment, we're gonna have a report in September, we're being told, and,
Oh, here's buildings.
the integrated pest management report, it's.
Go through that in detail.
Go through that in detail, got 3 more hours yet?
Yeah.
Okay, any questions on the buildings and grounds portion? All the items were covered. Okay, hearing none, can I have a motion simply to move these items to the superintendent's, to the agenda for approval? We're not approving them, the public will still have a bite at the apple. I have a motion by Mr. McEnon, do I have a second? By Mrs. DePinto, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Okay, moving on to,
Support service.
Student
somebody
achievement.
tell me what's next. Student
23.
achievement?
Page
Mrs.
23.
Bloom,
23.
student achievement, your committee report.
Yes, we had our meeting, and it was, as meeting with Dr. Labby always is, very encouraging, very productive. We settled a problem with the summer school. We did have students who attended, and the principals are going to be able to track them. The good news is that all student schedules will be on the parent portal by August 25th. 26th, okay. 26th.
At 3 o'clock,
Okay,
3 o'clock.
there we go.
beginning at 3 o'clock.
We discussed the park testing, which is being investigated, or a committee has been set up by the governor to look into the park testing, but it's going to go forward anyway. However, it will not impact the graduation eligibility. Okay, so we discussed the new courses. We're still looking to get more curriculum to approve. And the change in the marking period, all those dates are in the report here. And back to school night and conferences and marking periods. So that's where we're at right now.
Comments on student achievement, Mr. McEnon?
For our next meeting is September,
26, no, the.
August 26th.
August
the
26th.
committee meeting.
Yes,
August
the committee
26th.
Do we have agendas, items yet?
Not
So I'd like to add, I mentioned earlier about the Common Core. I understand the curriculum piece of it. And I know that there are some other issues that there's a lot of people been writing letters and concerns, the incident we had at our PIC meeting, that are other parts of that law that are not curriculum related that got some people concerned. So I want to understand what those are. So I went online, looked at Common Core. Is there something in writing, is there something school districts have been provided that has the Common Core and has all the aspects of it, especially when it deals with what a local school district has to do as far as reporting student information up the chain. I think that's what has a lot of people concerned, and I don't understand that, and I don't know what that entails, and I'd like to be able to get my hands around what that means, and what's involved, and what is the concern of people that are not supporting of it, and I don't think it's the curriculum piece of it.
Yeah, if you don't mind me even
Sure.
addressing what your concern is, there is a lot of confusion that people have with regard to the Common Core state standards and the Partnership for Assessment of Readiness for College and Careers, the
Right,
PARC
that's PARC,
assessment. There's two components to it. So basically, several years ago, the Department of Education basically sponsored a waiver for New Jersey to waive out of NCLB sanctions. Okay? In doing so, we had to go ahead and demonstrate that we would change the way that we evaluate teachers, which was the advent to Teach New Jersey, the new statute for tenure, as well as Achieve New Jersey, the new regulations for how we go ahead and evaluate teachers utilizing student assessment results within those evaluations. What we also had to do was adopt the Common Core state standards for English language arts and mathematics, and had to agree to take some form of assessment to measure how well our students are meeting those standards. That's why we entered the consortium for PARC. Right now, I believe 45 states have adopted the Common Core state standards. However, a number of states are dropping out of the PARC component of that, which is causing the federal government to question whether they should still receive their Title I, II, and III monies, according to the NCLB grant that we all receive annually. They now have to justify that they're using another form of assessment to measure the progress of their students with regard to the Common Core state standards. Right now, approximately, and Marilyn, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe only 19 to 25 states are taking the PARC assessment. There is much belief that that's politically driven too. New Jersey has always fared very, very well. In fact, we've always ranked in the top 5 nationally in education. The remaining states, it is believed that we will rank close to number 1 compared to those states on the PARC assessment. So New Jersey has decided at this point that we are taking the PARC and moving forward with the PARC. And the PARC is by far what is most controversial. I remember attending a Board of Education meeting in June where Marilyn went through and gave you the experience of taking that assessment, which is far different than what our students are used to. That is what is creating the most controversy in the movement. There is far less controversy on the purpose and the philosophy toward going to the Common Core state standards. It's how we're measuring students, their performance on that. To complicate matters, we also received, you might remember a couple years ago, Race to the Top money. Race to the Top money. Tied into that is us remaining within the PARC consortium.
So do we have something in writing that is the Common Core that, because people ask questions and don't have
Yeah,
answers.
the Common Core is a set of standards. Yes, we have that. All of our supervisors have that. Our
Well,
teachers have that.
I've seen the curriculum piece of it, but the other things.
That is the piece of it. That's the Common Core state standards. It's a standard, curriculum-based standards. Do I have in writing the waiver? I can try to do my best to ask the Department of Education if they can provide me with a copy of the waiver that they submitted to the federal government to waive out of NCLB sanctions. I can try to get that to you. I can also try to see if I can get the Race to the Top language that they also submitted.
Has all of our curriculum that we're going to be implementing in September been aligned with the Common Core?
Yeah, that had to be aligned as late as early as 2009.
I know we were.
We had to have all of our
I
curriculum.
know
and
we're a
it-
little behind, but we met that.
Right, depending on the courses, couple levels, I think it was the middle school math was the last one that had to be aligned.
I think that'd be a good discussion at the next meeting, Ms. Bloom, if you're okay with that.
Thank you.
Anything else on student achievement?
I
Mrs.
just-
Backup?
A quick question. You said that the schedules will be ready 3 o'clock, August 26th?
Yes.
That's for the parents, correct?
Correct.
What about the teachers' side of their schedules? When will they get them, the teachers? Like their schedules, what
what
they're
classes
teaching,
you're
their
teaching.
list of class, their list of students, and
Th-
will
they'll-
they have access the 26th or prior?
I don't know if they'll have access prior. They probably will at the high school, but I'm not sure. I'm assuming you mean like the middle school and the high school.
Like, is everybody
or
getting them at once?
schools?
Are teachers getting them at the same time as the parents?
Well, the parents' access to parent portal is different, the schedules that they'll be getting there, than what the teachers receive.
Right, but are the
Okay.
teachers getting them
Doc-
prior to August
Dr.
26th?
Shediak, Mr. Gluckmaloy is standing up. He's either stretching or he has the answer.
Do you have the answer? Okay.
Thank you,
you.
Thank you very
So-
much.
So if I went on August 26th at 3 o'clock, I could get my schedule?
Yes.
Well, nor do a teacher. Right.
Yes.
I as a parent or a teacher,
Yes.
thank you very much, Mike.
Thank you, Mr.
Yes, you
Gluckmaloy.
will.
Any other questions on student achievement? Can I have a motion to approve, to move student achievement to the agenda? By Mrs. DePinto, do I have a second?
Second.
By Mrs. Bloom. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Carried. Moving on to governance 2030. We've got an item there on the authorizing the superintendent of school to appoint anyone necessary, and the board will approve retroactively so that we can properly open school. We are reaffirming existing policy 354231 for free lunch and also approving the NJDOE free lunch regulations that go along with it, which are issued annually. And then we have the integrated pest management report submitted by Mr. Pantoliano. Why that's under governance, I have no idea, but we'll approve that as well. And then we have 4 policies that the Board of Education went through. I don't know if that's a message, Mr. DeAndrea, for us or what, but yeah.
Take it any way you like.
We have 4 policies that the policy committee met on via WebEx, which is basically online and electronic. The first one, and I'll get to the code of conduct in a second. The first one was managing life-threatening allergies in schools. That is policy that's actually required by state law. New Jersey school boards, for some reason, didn't have one, so I had to use Strauss-Esme. But it's basically their language with some additional language that we added, outlining what the parents' responsibilities are in terms of notifying the schools, sending medication, et cetera. Photographs of pupils, that was basically just updated, as noted, to change from DIFUS to the new acronym, or the new abbreviation for that organization, as well as indicating that we won't post any photos without parents' permission. And in the independent educational evaluations policy was one that was proposed by Dr. Labby, seeking for us to try to limit the amount that can be spent on independent third-party evaluations after the board has already done an evaluation. Basically, under state law, a parent has the ability to request a third-party independent evaluation of their child, which the board must pay for under certain circumstances. But the board also has the right to cap the amount that we will pay for that evaluation. The parent may still request a more expensive evaluation, but the board will only be responsible for a portion of that, and that rate will be set annually.
So right now, we had no cap? In
We
the
have no
policy, it
cap.
was
No,
blank. It
not in the
was-
policy. I don't know what the district was doing.
The only cap we have is the superintendent salary cap.
And we have implemented that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was silent as to a cap, is what you're saying?
Correct.
What cap did you want?
We'll propose that during the next Board of Education business meeting. In the past, I've used a figure around $700 per
$700?
evaluation. $700 per evaluation, but that will be an item on finance that we'll ask you to approve during the next Board of Education business meeting.
Yeah, the policy indicates the cap will be approved annually, so there's no number in there. So it's
Okay.
kind of like the building, the rates for the building use policy, it's approved, it'll be approved annually with that.
Okay.
But we needed the policy first. And then the final one was the code of conduct. The policy committee discussed that. We saw some anomalies in terms of how things were arranged in terms of progressive discipline. So we asked the administration to take a look at that. The high school would like that policy adopted for the start of school. So the policy committee did not get a chance to meet formally to review the final recommendations, but the board has seen that. If the board has any discussion on it, we can certainly entertain that now. If you don't, we can approve it. If you want the policy committee to look at it, we can, but that will delay implementation for the start of school. We did discuss with Dr. Labby, and going forward, he's going to look to have any type of starting school change policies presented to the board like in the May-June timeframe, so we don't run into this issue. It just, he wasn't here when this whole thing got underway.
To jump in, that's going to be an annual procedure that we perform at the end of every year. Our Health and Safety Committee will basically review the current code of conduct and then make any changes, recommendations for changes to the policy, or to the governance committee.
So the table, that, the matrix that defines the progressive discipline for certain infractions, is that going to be embedded into the student handbook that's online for them to sign? How does the students know that?
Yeah, the change, most of that information has gone out to print, if that information goes out in the form of print. Right now, I know at the high school, we are utilizing the Safer War Memorial High School app. So that information will be changed on the app, so our students will instantaneously, once it's approved for a second reading and the changes are adopted by the board, that information will go directly up into the app and so forth. However, the changes to the code, how they're communicated to our elementary school and our middle schools, that information will have to be then communicated to parents, posted on the website and so forth, indicating the change from what they received in print to what, the code is now. Most of the changes occurred within the third and fourth infractions. So hopefully those changes will be communicated well before any child reaches, we hope, a third or fourth infraction for any type of violation to the code.
Good job putting it together.
Is that the only changes in there? Are the third and fourth infractions, or are there other
No,
changes?
There's also a
said
parking
the
section.
majority of them. There was a new section for parking added to the high school. But, as Mr. Sayak mentioned, we started reviewing some of the changes that were requested by the high school level. But as we were doing so, we noticed that there was some inconsistency with the lower levels. So we developed an ad hoc committee, and I can't thank Ms. Marr, Mr. Aguilis, Ms. Jacobic, Mr. Rubino, and Ms. Romero for quickly, within a day, coming to my office and dedicating 4 hours to comprehensively go through that code of conduct so that we could make it very consistent.
The other piece too on that code of conduct, when you look at lateness to school, the high school is NA. There's no lateness to school policy, and that's because first period begins right at the start of school at 7:45. So the lateness to class policy applies, and if they're late to class too many times, they actually cume out of the class. So if you see what it says NA, it's not that there's not a penalty for being late to school. It's just that it's the same as being late to a class.
Okay, so are you saying that the policy committee is not going to review it? Was that what you were saying?
Unless the board wants us to, or my plan was just to have the board approve it. And certainly if the policy committee wants to go through it in more detail, we can. But also, this is just the first reading, so it'll actually be approved in final form on September 2nd.
Right, so is the policy committee going to review it from now till September 2nd, or no? The
that's
committee's
up-
not going to look at it at all?
I wasn't going to recommend it, but certainly if the policy committee wants to do that, we can.
I think the key, again, is we'd like to have the policy in place before September 4th, when the kids enter our schools.
I read it. I mean, there's nothing in there from a disciplinary perspective. I think it's good policy. I like the table matrix. Now everything's in one spot. You can see what it is.
Right.
It's well formatted. And, thanks for the page thing.
Thank you. I thank Mr. Glock-Malloy for that.
Is the policy committee okay with proceeding in that fashion? Mrs. Strapp, Mr. Walsh?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. All right. And then the final item is appointing Mrs. Strapp as Parent Involvement Council Liaison from the Board of Education to pick. I didn't realize that was actually a board policy that we had to specifically take board action. So we're recommending Mrs. Strapp serve as council. Yes, she interviewed extensively for the job. We called her back 3 times.
For 8 years.
Yes.
I have the rating sheets.
Yes. Can I have, is there any further discussion on the governance? Can I have a motion to move governance to the agenda?
So,
By Mrs. Bacco, second by Mr. McEnone.
Mr.
All-
DePinto.
Mrs. DePinto, sorry. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Moving on to Vision 2030 personnel, Mr. Walsh.
Yes, the Personnel Committee met with Dr. Labby, And I requested about a 40-minute meeting and wound up going about an hour and a half. So that wasn't too bad for Dr. Labby. The highlight of the meeting,
Seems to be a theme, though,
it was
right?
it was good though. It was productive. The highlight of the meeting was talking about the recommendation and contract for our new assistant superintendent, Tamika Bachnight. She's dynamic. We also talked about some new positions. We had a lot of people resign at the end of the 2013-14 year. So some people had to be added, some new employees. But that was basically the thrust of our meeting.
And our dynamic assistant superintendent is here. I'd like to introduce for the public Tamika Bachnight, our new assistant superintendent for human resources. Welcome. Thank you. And you'll be up here next meeting.
Over there, Kevin.
Any other comments or discussion on personnel?
Number 35, I have to abstain on Lisa Eicher.
Okay. You'll note the abstention on Lisa Eicher for 35. Mrs. Bloom.
Page, hold on.
Oh,
Page
sorry.
41. Page 41.
41, number 35.
Page 41, 35.
Attachment A.
All right. Only on the one person.
Yes.
Mrs. Bloom?
Same attachment, I have to abstain on Kevin Bloom. And I also have to abstain on number 34, which is the supervisor's contract. And I have to abstain on number 22, which is the assistant superintendent.
And number
22, 34, 35.
Also the principal's contract, Mrs. Bloom?
Is that in here? I didn't see the principal.
It is in there somewhere.
under finance.
Oh, it's under
Yeah,
finance.
because I had
Okay.
trouble finding it. too, I remember.
And I have to abstain on that also.
All right, just bear with me 1 second as we find it.
Page 10.
Number 20.
Page 10.
Page 10, yes, number 20.
Is she required also to do the supervisors then?
Supervisors
did.
as well, yes.
I s-
All right, so
I said that.
is-
That's number 34.
Well, that was
in
their
certi-
salaries, but also their
The
contract.
contract itself.
Okay.
And that was
Okey-doke.
number 12 on page 3.
Okey-doke. You got it.
Anything else under personnel?
I have a question.
Yes, Mrs. Becca.
Page 27, number 4. That was on the agenda last meeting, and it was withdrawn, and now it's back. Why was it withdrawn, and now it's back?
There was a question before the meeting by someone. I did not have the direct answer, so I thought it was best to pull it. After reviewing the contract, I do not find any indication as to the person not receiving that retirement pay, so that's why it is returning.
What's it for?
Sick leave
Sick leave?
upon retirement.
Okay, and I have one other question. Number 42, the substitutes, we usually, page 42, number 42.
And number 42.
42.
42, 42.
There's only 2 substitutes listed here. We normally have a huge list. Is that going to be at the next meeting?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Anything else under personnel?
Mr. DeAndrea, on attachment A, I pointed out to Dr. Labby that there is no degree or salary listed for Ms. Gentile. It's blank in our attachment A. So you may want to hold that till we get the information.
Where is attached?
It's on page 41.
Oh, maybe that's why. She's a new hire, so she wasn't in attachment A?
She
She's on
shouldn't be in
41?
attachment A as a new
Okay.
hiree. She should be listed separately.
I'm look-
The name may be there, but she should be listed as a new hiree.
Yeah, she's listed, Michelle Gentile is listed in attachment A with no degree or status,
Where
but
did
she's
you
listed
say
on the
you saw it,
agenda.
Mike?
She should
We're
be
not-
on the agenda
That's
before
her
she
father.
appears on
No.
that attachment. She's new to the district.
She was on
That's
the last
probably why.
agenda. She was on the last agenda.
She was on the last
She was
agenda.
approved as a hire, but now this is the salary indication, and there's nothing there.
Was she on the last agenda?
She was on the
think
last
She was on
agenda.
the last agenda. Okay, so
The
she's
eighth-
already been
She's
approved.
already been approved.
So
She's
there's
already
no
been
need
approved.
to have her approved again because she's already been approved. Okay, so just note that when we approve attachment A, we will, remove Michelle Gentile's name since
And-
she's already been approved.
We'll look into that further. If
But I
for
don't-
some, if for one reason or another, she was not on the last agenda, we'll make sure on September 2nd
Right.
that we formally approve her at her
She was on the last agenda.
step
Was that,
and go.
no, I'm sorry, it was not the last agenda. It was it was before you got
The
here.
June 30th agenda.
It was before you got here.
Pre-Labby.
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 Okay, Pre-Labby.
Okay, so
Is that the new
I will
statement?
go ahead and research to confirm that.
It was June 30th, yeah.
I'll-
it was-
I'll
it
make
was-
sure
It was the
that-
day before you started.
Because I went through the July 15th agenda and I didn't see it, but I will confirm that. And in the case for which it may not be, we'll make sure that we get her approved by September 2nd.
Anything else on personnel? Dr. Labby, the grievances which we heard in executive session, do we need to take formal action tonight, or will September 2nd be sufficient and within the timelines of the negotiated agreement?
I believe September 2nd will be sufficient.
Okay, very good. Can I have a motion to move personnel to the agenda?
So moved.
By Mr. Walsh. Do I have a second?
Second.
By Mrs. Bloom. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Carried. Okay. We will now open it up to public participation for the meeting that never ends. If you wish to speak on any item on the superintendent's report, please come to the microphone and state your name and address for the record. If you have other items to discuss, we can discuss them at the end.
I'm sorry, Kevin, can I jump in here? I have two quick things.
Relating to the agenda? Like the
No,
superintendent's report?
forget it.
No. I didn't- just no. Is it related to the superintendent's report or other items?
No, I believe it's related to the superintendent's report. And you
Please
could let me
hold
know
that
if it-
thought. Yes.
Okay, I'm just wondering what the student increase is with kindergarten, do we know that, and also just across the board? And I should have given you an answer.
Enrollment, I'm assuming.
The enrollment numbers?
Yeah.
Okay, as of 2 weeks ago, the enrollment numbers for kindergarten were lower than they have been in the past. However, the elementary principals are supposed to be giving me the numbers again tomorrow, the most updated numbers. They have had quite a few registrations within the last 2 weeks. So I don't have the exact numbers, but if you would like, I can let you know at the end of this week as soon as I get the information.
Okay, and the enrollment across the board?
Enrollment, I've only been keeping track, honestly,
Of the kindergarten?
of
Okay,
actually the whole elementary, the K through 3,
okay.
because we were concerned about the numbers. If there was a large influx at one grade level, our first grades, we have a lot of first grade students, so we were keeping an eye on keeping the balance.
That's the concern, right.
The concern
We're
there.
going to continue with the enrollment reports, the ADA reports,
Right,
right?
right,
And when
those
is the
come
report due to the
monthly.
state? October, as far as your final-
October
October
15th. It's as of October 15th, it's not due that day, but it's our enrollment figures as of October 15th.
Okay.
But I can give you the updated ones this week, for kindergarten in particular.
Thank you.
And actually, it's a very good question, because it also reminded me, Dr. Labby, what the superintendent's always done in Saraville is the first couple of days of school, we get an enrollment report. It's like the first 3 to 5 days. We would get a daily enrollment report, so we know how we're trending. So, thank you for reminding me about that. Anything else? All right, back to public. Anyone wish to speak regarding the superintendent's report? Think we wore them out. This is good. Okay.
I don't know, maybe
that
not.
lucky.
Barbara's getting up.
Oh, okay.
We have no microphone.
I thought I covered everything that you were interested in.
Maybe she's going to compliment you.
Oh, yeah, it's over there.
Barbara Kilcummins, 22 Schmidt Street. I'm up for change, and I think change is good. But this meeting, it's like, wow, I need a roadmap to follow the agenda and the committee and everything else. And it just, it's getting my bearings of what's what. But real quick, what is the status on the sign for the school? I know you mentioned it, and you went over it briefly. $14,000, the cost. I'm not giving up. I mean, you're going to hear me every meeting about that sign.
The finance committee agreed that we wanted to pursue it. We were talking Wi-Fi versus, someone going out there with a computer. Mr. DeAndrea, you have an update since the Finance Committee meeting?
I've spoken to Mr. Pantoliano. We spoke to the one contractor. We're waiting on the final specifications so that we can go out and get the formal quotations so that we can make sure that we get the formal process in place. So hopefully we'll continue to move forward on that. But the toughest part is finding someone that's willing to retrofit it. We found one, now we have to get his specifications on it.
And to purchase a brand-new sign, it's like twice the amount, so we're trying to retrofit so that, we save half the cost.
So
'Cause the frame of the sign is
28,000
fine.
versus 14,000.
Probably about 28,000 versus 14, correct, for a new
Depending
sign?
on the sign.
Well, believe me, I think it would be money well spent. Like I said, we hosted the Snapple Bowl, and there was nothing there to even mention it, welcome it. And there's a lot of other functions, and it's not just me, it's people in the community that are interested, and want to know what's going on.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Anyone else for public on the superintendent's report? Okay, hearing none, we'll close public, and we're going to do this in parts.
Each part, Kevin.
Each part. I'll take a motion to approve Vision 2030 Finance and Infrastructure. By Mrs. DePinto, do I have a second?
Second.
By Mrs. Strapp. Roll call.
Yes. Mr. Balka,
Yes, accept items noted.
Mrs. Backo,
Yes.
Mrs. Bloom,
Yes, accept items noted.
Mr. Brzezinski,
Yes.
Mrs. DePinto, Mr. McEnone,
Yes.
Mrs. Trapp,
Yes.
Mr. Walsh,
Yes.
and Mr. Syak.
Yes. Listen, I'm going to go out on a limb here, so don't get excited. I'm going to ask for a motion to approve Vision 2030 Student Achievement, Governance, and Personnel as a group. By Mrs. DePinto, do I have a second?
And
By Mrs. Trapp. Any comments? You have how everyone voted or has issues
We
with
got
or
it.
whatever? We got all that?
we got it.
Roll call.
Mr. Balka,
Yes, accept items noted.
Mrs. Backo,
Yes.
Mrs. Bloom,
Yes, accept items noted.
Mr. Brzezinski,
Yes.
Mrs. DePinto, Mr. McEnone,
Yes.
Mrs. Trapp,
Yes.
Mr. Walsh,
Yes.
and Mr. Syak.
Yes, I just saved us 5 minutes. This is good. Delegate to New Jersey School Boards Association, the only thing I wanted to share with you is September 27th, there is an advanced boardsmanship training at the Marriott in Princeton. I've seen the agenda. It's a good program if any board member is interested. It's a Saturday. It's an all-day. Saturday, September 27th. And you get the credits for Master Board.
There's something else, there's something else on the 6th, is that,
The 6th, the Saturday the 6th is our first any county meeting.
okay.
Yes. A county meeting? That's at the Marriott, the Scanicon, the same place you went for your orientation, that Princeton Conference Center down there. Yeah.
They serve good food.
The only thing is, if anyone is interested in going to that, there is a fee for that, so the board will need to approve it in advance. So you need to let Mr. DeAndrea know so we can get it on the agenda for September 7th, September 2nd. It's Saturday, September 27th.
Oh, it's a Saturday?
No
All right.
matter how good the food is.
That concludes my report. Anything for discussion
Yes.
or
Yes.
special committee reports? Yes, Mr. McEnroe, you jumped in.
I just want to mention that we got an email today about, I think you were on it too, our high school band enrollment is up to 79, which I think is the highest it's been in, 20. So I want to establish a brevity committee.
So, Mr. McEnone,
Come up with some suggestions.
Mr. McEnone,
Yes.
you didn't come to the meetings when Joe Bellin was on the board?
Oh, I already shot myself.
But if this was early, no, and listen, we will look at our meeting process. This was the first time through it. Mrs. Kilcummins, I'm aware of your comments. I know it was a little confusing going through, but look, we accomplished one thing which you wanted. We got more dialogue. You always said you wanted to hear more people talking. You got dialogue.
I'm pulling the chain.
But we will look at the process in all seriousness to see where we can streamline. Mrs. Becca.
This is not related to anything that we've previously discussed. I attended a council meeting last week. And what?
I heard it was an
I heard
exciting
Yes,
meeting.
obviously everybody's heard, but you can have my point of view now. There was a pilot program, when this is where one of my concerns is. I specifically went up, addressed myself as a taxpayer. There seemed to be some confusion how they can't separate me from board member and taxpayer, but I said it many times. I went as a taxpayer. I was not there to represent the Board of Education. But there was a pilot program that they voted on, and it did pass, and it's for apartments over where the Club Benet is, of which there will be no school taxes collected. So as a taxpayer, I objected to that. But one of my concerns was there was all sorts of talk back and forth. You could watch the agenda, the meeting on TV if you want. I think you'll find it quite entertaining. And one of the concerns I had was there was a lot of talk about the school board. Art Rittenhouse was there on the telephone, and it was a little confusing, but they said they called the school board. I don't know what that exactly meant, and they were referred to a website. There was, but then Art explained they just wanted some data. I don't know exactly who referred them to the website, but that was, but some people wanted to talk to the school board and some didn't. Wasn't really my issue. My concern was the business administrator made a comment, and he said he did contact the school board, which was a little surprising to me, and said that, and I said, well, who did you contact? And he said, Mr. DeAndrea, and he said he had no problem with it.
Correct.
Right. So my question to you is, were you representing the school board in that comment?
His question to me was, if the figures given by the developer, I'll call it, indicates there's only 12 students that are going to come out of the development, would that pose an impact on the district? And my answer was no.
No. So
12 students, I did not get into anything further than the comment of 12 students.
Okay. It was clearly represented at that meeting that the school board had no issue with this.
Not with
And
12
as a
students,
school
no.
board member, I just had an issue that I was spoken for. I mean, that was made, I mean, I think the public's
he-
perception was that
If he
you spoke.
interpreted that way, when he has a conversation with me as a business administrator to a business administrator,
Yeah, well, he
I'm-
didn't represent
I'm
you as
representing the
discussing the
school
12
district.
kids. He represented you as discussing the program in general.
well, I have lunch with him on Thursday, and I'll address that with him.
The pilot program, which is payment in lieu of taxes, doesn't prevent the borough council from receiving that payment and providing us some money.
Right, which is quite clear. That is true. And that was made quite clear, but you know.
They never do.
Well,
I mean,
it's not gonna happen.
No, so, I mean,
You talk about the development of Old Spy Road.
Right.
You
Yes.
know,
Right.
and I sit on the planning board. When that development came before the planning board, you know the history, there's been a lot of
Right.
different developments that went there. I voted for that development simply because they were building 1- and 2-bedroom condos compared to what they could build 3- and 4- and 5-bedroom homes like they did in Town Lake. Now, I had a conversation with the developer when he told me that would generate 12 kids. They use what they call a national planners thing, where they look at developments like that that have been built elsewhere, and they see how many school children that generated. And they came up with this number 12. And they understand, I don't have the information from them, but I think there's 125 units. Some of those are age restricted, which takes care of that problem.
yeah, I guess,
There's a
like you
number
see,
that a
but
person-
see, you're confusing me
No,
the same
no.
way that they were.
No, I'm not.
No, all right, okay.
I understand, but the payment in lieu of taxes is not something the planning board or I would, as a board member, support. The
Right.
town did that in order to get that development going, because what the builder is doing is other improvements on Old Spy Road, the intersection, knocking down that old club, all those things that are beneficial.
Right,
to that
and I
project.
do
But-
understand
but
that.
many
My issue,
towns,
right.
look, you look at Jackson, Six Flags was a payment in lieu of taxes. They're still sucking the wounds from that. I mean, that's not a good business deal, especially when you have to pay taxes and I have to pay taxes. And I think the rental that they're talking about there, to generate that money, exceeds what I could probably rent my house for.
Oh, yeah, the
So
rental
I
was,
don't
they were
understand
renting
that
at
either.
1,400 was what they quoted,
You
but,
can skew any
yeah.
statistics.
My issue was, as a taxpayer, I went up there like,
Well, I agree.
these are housing units that are not going to pay school taxes. We don't have such a thing in Saraville. But my concern was that there was a lot of conversation about how the school board was contacted, they didn't have an issue with it. I did not go to represent the school board, but of course, they threw that at me because I was there, so.
And I do think you need to follow it up. Because, I mean, look, if someone were to call me and say, do 12 students provide a significant impact on the school district? To that question alone, the answer is no. But my other question would be, do we really think there's only 12 students going to come out of there? Because I'm not necessarily convinced of that either.
That's
And
like
to
the
go
8
from,
national ed?
pardon?
That was the 8 students in
Yes,
national ed we're
exactly,
getting to.
exactly.
Like-
But then to go from 12 students will have an impact to, well, the school board has no issue with this development and no issue with a pilot program, that's a relatively large leap.
That wasn't a conversation we had.
Right. And my issue was, as a taxpayer, I mean, I was against the pilot program. The 12 kids isn't necessarily relevant because people who don't have children pay school taxes. So it doesn't, whether they move in with children or without children, they should still pay the school taxes. But my concern was more on how the school board was represented there.
If the board's okay with this approach, we'll have Mr. DeAndrea talk to the business administrator, and then at our next meeting, we can get a follow-up, and maybe we can send a letter, if necessary, to the council, just clarifying whatever position we have on this.
Am I the liaison with the council? Who's the liaison? From the
I think you are the liaison to the council, yes.
Going out.
Do I have to start going to another meeting now?
Yes.
I think we should,
You gotta go with Mrs. Backo.
She can go and speak for the board.
I did not speak for the board,
I believe you. But it's hard to separate that.
I guess.
Anything else under discussion?
I have one other thing.
Yes, Mrs. Stratton.
Sayreville Day is September 21. So who wants to, well, I'll put that in your lap because I won't be around.
Okay, so we're gonna need a list.
That's happened last year.
It happens often, but I'll be in the Caribbean, so,
Oh,
Okay, you're not coming back?
not for that day.
Oh, okay. All right, would you be willing to coordinate at least the schedules in advance of Sunday?
I thought Mike,
If-
I thought you said you wanted to do it.
I'll do that.
No.
I'll help the team, sure.
No, that's fine, I don't care, but I just want to say I'm not going to be here, so if anybody else wants to step up and take the.
I would say, given how good you have been at it in past years, if you could get the schedule set up with the individual board members and
Okay.
coordinate that piece.
It would
and
be
then
my
we can-
pleasure.
And then we could take it from there.
What day did you say?
September 21.
I have September 14th on my
Oh.
calendar.
Oh, yeah?
I have the 21st as the
Sounds
rain
like Ms.
date.
Backo
Could you
needs
just?
to handle this now.
No, that's okay. I just want to,
All right, so your
Just want
first
to
action
check.
is to find out what day it is.
I had written down the
Maybe you
14th.
will be here, Ms.
And the 21st is a rain date. I'm not sure if I got it from our agenda.
It's a 2-week cruise.
14th, you say?
Yeah, so
14th?
maybe, are you going to be here on the 14th?
No, I'll be at a Yankee game in Baltimore.
So,
Retirement
either way, you
is
can't do it,
wonderful.
so.
All right, so if you could notify the board when
Yeah.
it is and
All
also coordinate the schedule, that would be great.
Okay, I apologize.
Any other discussion items? All right, hearing none, we'll open up to public for any item on the agenda. Mr. Bashada.
Any item not on the agenda.
Any item not on the agenda? Any item?
Any item.
Anything.
On or not on?
It's the same paper you had last time.
Same one?
It's the same paper you had last year.
Thomas Bashada, 17 Green Hill
Fresh.
Avenue, Parlin, New Jersey. The reason I'm here mainly tonight is what Mrs. Batko was just talking about. I have the ordinance number here. It's ordinance number 267-14. The reason I'm here tonight is because I'd like the board to take some action with this council that we have and ask them to rescind this ordinance. The idea behind this ordinance, whether you're familiar with it or not, is going to be that half of the units are going to be one bedroom and the other half is going to be two bedrooms, okay? So you're looking at maybe 60 to 70 units that are going to be two bedrooms, which means that you're going to have a bigger impact. Remember, Mr. McEnone, the national lead? There are about 20 students that were going to show up there. This is a very bad thing that's going to happen to this board. Mr. Labby mentioned about the budget, all right? In years to come, you're adding 70 students down there. How is that going to affect the budget? Are you going to be able to hire new teachers? No. Are you going to have to find more classroom space? Yes. Where's the money going to come from? These people are going to get away with 25 years free of not paying school taxes, which is not fair to all the taxpayers here in Cerebral. Something should be done about it. I'm asking the board tonight to set up a resolution and post it, send it to the council, because I'm going to be there Monday night and complain about this ordinance because it's not fair to the taxpayers and it's not fair to the students of this district. Remember the saying that we always had, the children come first? Well, let's make it a priority and do something for the children, because in the future, it's going to have a direct impact on what's going to happen. Like Dr. Labby mentioned, the budget. The budget's going to be hurt very bad by this. The second item that I have here tonight is that I had a realtor contact me and about the test scores, evidently, and she's not very happy because it's awful hard for her to sell a house here in Cerebral. There's a website, and I'll spell it out, www.trulia.com/property. In this, you can dial up a house here in Sayreville. Like I dialed up 18 Duscos Drive in Parlin. And when you go to this website, you go through it. It has schools, crime, amenities, transportation, etc. And then it had a listing of our schools, which is not a very good sign here. I'm going to give you what out of a rating of 10. Our high school rates 5 out of 10. Eisenhower rates 6 out of 10. The middle school rates 6 out of 10. Samsel rates 6 out of 10. Arlith rates 7 out of 10. Truman rates 7 out of 10. And Wilson's the best performer, 9 out of 10 on a scale. Now, with your new transition here coming with the 2030 vision, one thing I have to mention to everybody here also, in order to make this work, this has to start at the house, the home where the children are going to be coming from, our future students. We have to impress upon the parents that it's their input that makes their children succeed. I raised 2 sons by myself. I was on their tail all the time to make sure that they succeeded in school, and they succeeded, and they have very good jobs today. And 2 other things. Mr. DeAndrea, the charter schools in New Brunswick, do you have to be Jewish to go to the charter school in New Brunswick?
You don't know that?
No, I've got a comment to make about this.
I do
First
know
of all,
there-
which charter school? I mean, I got,
No,
There
no,
are
no, no.
3 charters.
Let's not get smart, Mr.
We
McEnany.
do have 3 charter schools that are within our confines. I do know one of them is of the Jewish religion, but I do not know if it's a requirement to attend the school.
See, the reason I ask this, because this could impact this district right now, is that the parochial schools that are closing can apply to the state of New Jersey for a charter, and that would take money out of the budget also, going for Visions 2030. This is something to think about. And the last thing that I have here, Mr. McEnroe mentioned about the cafeteria. The biggest lobbyist group for this school system is the New Jersey School Board Association. Mr. Syak, you've been the president. If there's an issue, why don't you bring that up at your central meeting that you're going to have in the coming month, within the next month, and address this about the school lunches that our students are having a problem, and I guarantee there's other districts that are having a problem. And I know that I've read in the news that states have already thrown this idea out. So it's something to think about how to improve what you have here. Thank you.
okay, thank you, Mr. Bashada. And I'm sure Dr. Labby will also check out that website. The one thing you have to be cautious about with rankings, and I know this happened to one district up in Bergen County, and it was actually with Inside Jersey. They had actually dropped in the rankings, and they went and called the publisher and said, well, what goes into that? And they got all that information, and they made a whole bunch of changes to cater to the rankings. And then 2 years later, when the report came out, they didn't move. So they called up the publisher and said, how come we didn't move? And the answer that came back to them was, oh, well, we changed how we rank the schools. So all the stuff that they changed to focus on shifted. So in addition to where we rank, it's also important to see what goes into that and what we need to adjust.
Okay, one other thing I wanted to mention at this meeting that they approved that ordinance. Mrs. Eicher, who is a teacher here in the district, voted no on it because she knows that the impact, what's going to mean to the students within this district. Also, we have a candidate. I didn't get a chance to talk to her, Mrs. Kilpatrick. I would like her to get involved with this also because it affects the students in the district in the future.
Okay, thank you. Yes, sir.
Louis Santiago, 23 Astor Court. I would like to, I apologize first off if I have any name issues here. I'm new at this. Mr. McEnroe, as you said before about our school lunches, I believe that you're completely correct that who wants to eat whole wheat pizza? Who wants to eat a sweet potato fry? As I've observed over the last few years, and especially this year, I've noticed a slight change and a lot of decline of our food system. And that is a very big reason why we are losing money, because I observe every day students will just throw out a side salad or throw out sweet potatoes, and I feel that we're wasting money and that there are better ways that we can serve healthy foods within state guidelines without wasting money and throwing it out, without shoving it down our throats. I feel that that's the reason why we're losing money.
Did you recently graduate, or?
No, I'm actually a student. I'll be a senior this year.
Okay, so what sells here? What do students like to eat? Did anybody ever ask you, anybody ever give you a survey?
Actually, in my economics class, we did a curriculum-based survey about the food. I brought an example to the class, and we said that it's definitely out of a class of 25, 24 plus the teacher all agreed that it's not worth our money and that it could be improved drastically.
Sounds scientific to me.
And as Dr. Labbe, excuse me, I apologize on that, I'm new at this. As you mentioned, food and smell and appeal is definitely a big thing, and we lack that here. Because would you eat a wilted salad? Would you eat mystery meat tacos? Would you eat pizza out of a bag? And I have observed that. Out of a bag. Pizza. That is absurd.
Have you talked with your student council representatives?
I have
bring
talked to
this
the
issue?
manager, I've talked to the supervisor, and they all give me, it's the person. There's frozen juices every single day that we have to eat with a spoon that just winds up getting chucked. What I ask, what can we do to improve this? And I think that a food nutritionist can help and improve our food system and help improve the revenue that we're making off of that.
Mr. DeAndrea, is there a way we can get this young man to sit down with Ms. Jenkins and
I'm
maybe have
glad
a conversation?
On one, and I know Mr. McEnroe is not going to like this, one of the requirements under the child nutrition program is that Mrs. Jenkins actually meet with students and perform and actually have advisory groups. So she is required now to have
why
youth
wouldn't I like that?
advisory
I think that's a
councils.
good idea.
So this would be a
So-
student-based group
Yes,
where
and-
we,
And part of her goals that I set with her evaluation is that she develop that at each school and get into the schools to meet with the students. So I would suggest that I directed her to deal with the principal, so let Mr. Brown know that you're interested, so that when that does occur, you can be a part of that committee.
okay, because I feel very strongly about this, and I feel that we have the power and the materials back there. I've been in the kitchen before, as you said before. We do have the capability of making a better, healthier school lunch.
What's the best thing you've eaten here that you like?
I stopped eating lunch last year because I decided that making my own grilled chicken salad and bringing it to school every day was better than eating that.
That's no good for revenue. Okay.
Yeah.
I appreciate
So-
you coming to the microphone and sharing your information.
Yes, well, I feel very
Obviously, we're taking this seriously. we
Yes,
wanna
and
look
I
into it.
feel that this, and I've talked to a lot of people about it, and I feel very strongly about this, and I take this very personally, and I feel that bring this to you will hopefully bring change this year. And even if it doesn't happen this year, for other people in other grades and other years to feel the effects of this change and to make a more better student attitude and to increase school lunch buying, because I personally do not want to buy that.
Now, Mr. Santiago, I have to ask you a question.
Yes, good.
You're here in August on
Yes.
a Tuesday night in a suit and tie. Did
Yeah.
you come here specifically fired up about school lunches, or what encouraged you to come out here tonight?
I felt that we needed a change, and that I feel like because I've turned my life into culinary arts, in which that's what I'm trying to pursue in my college, and I cook at home every single night for my whole family, and that's 3 of us. It is hard, but I feel that if I can do it by myself at my age, that these very nice adults here are capable of doing it. And yes, I've done a lot of research on this, and I feel very strongly about this. And I've looked over past previous board minutes, and I feel very strongly about it.
Well, and I'll share one more thing with you. In August of 1992, 22 years ago,
Yes?
someone such as yourself stepped up to that microphone and spoke for the first time. That would be me. And I was 17 and a junior in high school.
Well, we're getting there.
The
Well,
difference is you're more articulate than I was.
well, I've practiced this for a little
And he's
bit.
done absolutely nothing for the school lunch. That's what he's trying to tell you.
Well, I came up here, so hopefully that I can make a change, you know, that I've thrown it out there, and I really appreciate your time for this.
Thank you very much for coming out, and thank you for waiting for 3 hours.
Yeah, that's fine.
Anyone else for public? All right, hearing none, we'll close public at this time. Does anyone else have anything else to add? As I said, we talked about the council item. We can act on that on the September 2nd meeting, depending on what Mr. DeAndrea finds, unless the board chooses to act now.
Okay, I'll follow up on Phyllis. Yes, it's September 14th. I just Googled it. Thanks, Phyllis, for
Okay.
catching that.
But you
Okay.
still can't do it.
I still can't do it.
Okay.
It's mind-boggling.
I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Oh, the time for the next board meeting is 6:30, correct, Dr. Labby? We are 6:30 for the next board meeting? 6:30. And hopefully our executive session will get us out on time.
That's the long meeting,
Who
right?
made the motion? I'm sorry.
Can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
By Mrs. Bloom. Do I have a second?
Oh my God, it's
By
past
Mrs.
your
Strapp. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
Aye.